Well, happy Saturday, everyone. Happy being a relative term. We are breaking into your Saturday to do a not normal broadcast. We normally obviously are on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But of course, that is not what today is. It is Saturday, but we felt the need to come on and just give you all what you've, I'm sure, now started to hear all through your social media feeds, that the United States and Israel have jointly attacked the sovereign nation of Iran. That is an act of war. To those who are wondering, attacking a sovereign nation that has not attacked you, an act of war. You will note that during the Barack Obama administration, the United States and Europe signed an agreement with Iran for them to curtail their nuclear program. They were not only signatories to that agreement, but they were abiding by it. So there was really no reason for Donald Trump to come along and tear that agreement up. That agreement was working. It was operating. So there is no casus belli, is what they call it when you go to war with another country. We had Crystal Ball on the show the other night, and she talked about the fact that we were gearing up for war with Iran despite all of that. It really kind of doesn't matter what the facts are, because it is very clear that there is one entity in this world that really wanted a war with Iran. And that, of course, would be the nation of Israel, which apparently has jointly done these strikes on the nation of Iran. And just, you could put up that first bit there, because it is, at least according to the United States, they are claiming that Ali al-Khamenei, who is the supreme leader of Iran, that'll be A0.
I got you. Go ahead.
It was killed. And that is the claim that's being made. That is contrary to what the Iranians are saying themselves. According to the U.S., they are claiming that he was killed. He is the second. There was an Ayatollah Khomeini when I was growing up, the one who took over after 1979, after the revolution that put him in place. This is the second one. He is Khamenei, not Khomeini. And he has been in place since the late 1980s. According to the White House, he and several other top officials, he's an 86-year-old. He's been in place since 1989, following the death of the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who, again, if you remember the history, after the United States overthrew the democratically elected Mossadegh government in 1953, the Shah of Iran, a king we put in place, an illegitimate so-called king, ruled Iran until 1979, when he was overthrown by a revolution led by university students. They partnered with religious leaders. As we know, many revolutions throughout the world tend to spring from religious movements, because those are the people who can organize in secret in mosques or in churches. That student-led, religious-led movement put in place the current system, the Ayatollahs, and it turned the country from a democratic, sort of Western-leaning democracy that then became an autocratic, authoritarian state under a self-proclaimed king, an autocracy, into the current Islamic Republic of Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini was the first leader of that. He was followed in 1989, after he died, by this man, Khamenei, who, according to the U.S., is now deceased. The Iranians are disputing that. They are claiming that he is not dead and that he is still leading the country and leading the battle against the United States. But CBS, of course, the very pro-Trump regime CBS News, they are reporting that he has been killed. And so, depending on who you believe, Ayatollah Khamenei is either leading the Iranian resistance or he is very much deceased. Either way, what we do know is that the United States has meted extreme violence on the nation of Iran. If we could play this first clip, Jason, A1, this is a girls' school. This is a school for girls in Iran that was bombed jointly by Israel and the United States. The death toll is climbing. When we first heard about this morning, the death toll was in the 30s. We now are hearing, at least from Iran, that the death toll here is 85 people, and this is a school for children, for girls. Let's play A1, please. And if we could play A2, and this one, I just want to brace everyone for it. This is pretty grim, but this is a man reacting to, and again, these are videos that Al Jazeera English has posted to their social media, so that is where it is coming from. It's not confirmed by U.S. media, but this is what we're getting is media out of the region, and this is a man very tragically reacting to the bombing of that school. Just so you understand, when you bomb a country, and we're talking about bombing civilian populations, Israel, which did this throughout Gaza, which unfortunately has done this on a regular basis, and now jointly with the U.S. has done this apparently to a girls' school. Here's A2, please.
شیش هفت سال داشته باشه خوب به این دست این کودک بنگریم بزرگواران خوب نگاه کنیم یه بار دیگه رژیم صهیونیستی اثبات کرد ثابت کرد جهانیان ببینن جهانیان این جنایت رو ببینن.
We can leave it. It's pretty grim, but this is what happens when you bomb a country. You know, Donald Trump and other warmongers and people who believe in war as a solution to political challenges, they kind of sanitize what war looks like. But when you bomb a country, people die, and it is grim. And in this case, we're talking about children. I want to play you all one more clip that I think needs to be played, because no one has been more eager to see the U.S. put boots on the ground or bombs in the air and attack Iran. No one has wanted that more than Bibi Netanyahu and the Likud party, the right-wing Likud party. That's his political party in Israel. This has been a consistent theme throughout much of the last 30 years. So I want to play you a supercut. CNN actually created a supercut. So CNN in its current version, its previous version, before whatever the Ellisons do to it, CNN still does this kind of work. This is CNN doing 1 minute of Bibi Netanyahu's long history of calling for the U.S. to strike Iran.
Deadline for attaining this goal is getting extremely close. And Iran, by the way, is also outpacing Iraq in the development of ballistic missile systems that they hope will reach the eastern seaboard of the United States within 15 years. By next spring, at most, by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb. The foremost sponsor of global terrorism could be weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons. That would place a militant Islamic terror regime weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
And so this is something that Bibi has been selling like a used car salesman, really for the last at least 20 years, since the 90s. What's that, 30 years? This is something he wanted the Clinton administration to do. They wouldn't do it. It's something he wanted George W. Bush's administration to do. They wouldn't do it. It's something I'm sure he tried to convince Donald Trump to do in his first administration. And at that time, he didn't do it. And I want to note that lest you think that this is simply an homonym that talks about Bibi Netanyahu's desires, Benjamin Netanyahu has been in the White House at least 6 times in the 1 year and 1 month that Donald Trump has been president again. He was here on February 4th of 2025. He was the first person to visit the new Trump regime. He then came back on April 7th of last year, back on July 7th of last year, back on September 29th of last year, back on December 29th of last year, back again on February 11th of this year. He has visited the White House more than any other international official, period. And one of the things that he has been pushing for, and we know in the last visit, Iran was the subject of the last visit, is this idea of some sort of takeover of Gaza, which Donald Trump clearly agrees with, and war with Iran. Joining me now is Nayyera Haq, who worked in the State Department during... Oh, okay, no problem, Jason, take your time. Yeah, we're going to bring her in when we can. Nayyera Haq worked for the State Department during the Barack Obama administration 1.0. Okay, so we'll wait for her to, okay, so she's in the green room. So we will work on getting her on. Just know that we're live. So we are not at with our full strength in terms of our team. So I'm sorry, Jason, what did you say? I can't hear you. Okay, so we're going to wait for her to come on, and we'll bring her in as soon as we possibly can. But what you all need to understand is that this is a policy that is contrary to what the vast majority of Americans want. It's contrary to what the vast majority, I would assume, of Congress wants. Let me read you a couple of the responses to this. Kamala Harris posted on Twitter her response. Donald Trump is dragging the United States into a war the American people do not want. Let me be clear. I am opposed to a regime change war in Iran, and our troops are being put in harm's way for the sake of Trump's war of choice. I will note that last year, and Jason, let me know if you're able to bring this up, because I know you're doing 10 things at the same time. Bill Clinton warned that Bibi Netanyahu wanted and needed a war.
Our guest is here.
Excellent. Sounds good. Thank you very much. Joining us now is Nayyera Haq, former State Department spokesperson. Nayyera, thank you so much for being here. Sorry to pull you out of your Saturday. I know you have family things to do. Before we get to this Bill Clinton sound, I just want to get your response to the idea that apparently without congressional authorization, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has led us to commit an act of war against Iran.
Well, this is what we're doing as the United States right now, right? We're not trying to save people with humanitarian resources or help them live better lives. We are claiming to help an entire country of people, the people of Iran, by bombing multiple cities and then telling them that it's their opportunity to step up and out of nowhere create a new government. I mean, I'm horrified that this is what the United States is doing right now. And I say this as somebody who came up in the backdrop of 9/11. I was participated in trying to get Iraq and Afghanistan to work and to become functional democracies. And I truly believed that the United States was capable of doing many good things. But we saw what happened with those wars of regime change. Iraq led us to ISIS spreading throughout the region, and the Taliban ended up taking over Afghanistan anyway. We lost lives, we lost money, and we sit here now facing not only another war for regime change, but one in which the enemy here is very, very capable.
Yeah, Iran is not Iraq. And just so you all, and Jason, I'm probably just here to jump around here. If it's possible to bring up A12, whenever you have it, just holler at me and let me know, because you got it? Okay, A12, I want to bring it up because, just because I love maps, and I think it's really important to give people a sense of what you're talking about. If you look in the center of your screen, those of you in the chat, and thank you all for being here. I should note, and thank you all for jumping in on a Saturday. We really appreciate you taking the time. If you've not liked and subscribed, this would be a great time to do it. We want to make sure that we can get this information out to as many people as possible. If you look in the center of your screen, you will see Iraq, which is about a fourth the size of the country to its right on my screen. Iran, a much larger country. Iraq, for those of you who do not know, was effectively put together by the Europeans. It was put together essentially as sort of almost a colonized territory, which put together Sunnis, Shiites, and smaller ethnic groups, including the Kurds, who do not get along and never considered themselves a nation. It was sort of forced together, these three groups. But the majority of the people in Iraq are Shiite Muslims. That is a sect of Islam. The majority of people next door in Iran are also Shiites, but they're also Muslims. They're Persian Shiites, but they share the same religious beliefs. The Ayatollahs in Iran are actually revered by people who are Shiites in Iraq. When we invaded Iraq, what we effectively did is make Iran the biggest player in Iraq. We effectively handed Iran, which was an enemy of Iraq, over effectively to Iran's control. Can you talk just a little bit about the regional challenges, Nayyera, if we now have an Iraq that is effectively an ally of Iran, And now you have Iran, which is the big dog, a big dog in the region, which is now also free to attack other places outside of, where we have military bases in other parts of that region. And if Jason, if you could throw that map back up while Nayyera answers that.
Oh, and to your point, Iran has already attacked other places in the region. It was ready, right? The warnings were there. The U.S. military ships were there, and Iran is a very capable, strategic military. So they've had multiple plans of what to do, quote unquote, when Israel and the United States come for them. That was part of why there's always been this hope and pressure to have a negotiated solution. And Iran excels at what we call the proxy wars. And they were funding Hamas, they were funding Hezbollah. They've been able to wreak havoc throughout the region. They are not a good partner. They are not a good neighbor. It is indeed a rogue terrorist state, but that does not mean that going in guns blazing is going to help you solve the problem. So to your point, Iraq and Iran were enemies. Iraq had a vacuum of power. Iran was able to extend its proxy units into Iraq. You then have Saudi Arabia as a Sunni majority, a very extreme Sunni majority country. They're mortal enemies. Saudi was trying to get closer to Israel at this point, having economic relationships. And the only reason they weren't able to consummate that relationship was because of the war in Gaza. So you look at this map and you had a balance of powers as how the United States theoretically played in the region. The United States had Israel on one side, Saudi Arabia on the other, and then multiple air military bases throughout the region. Iran immediately attacked all of those military bases and has gone further, has now actually started hitting civilian locations in places like Dubai. There's hotels that have been bombed, right? So this is only going to escalate. And we now see also that the Strait of Hormuz, if you look there, which is where oil tankers go through, Iran said, don't come here. We will bomb the waters around us. So this is dangerous. It's dangerous not only for the region, but for Americans and what is our very fragile economy right now.
Indeed. If you look at that map, you'll note that the United States has military bases in Saudi Arabia, the big country there that is there on the Arabian Peninsula. We've already seen Bahrain, where we have military bases as well, has been hit by Iran. Iran has a real air force. They have a real military. The military in Iraq had been degraded over time because Saddam Hussein was so greedy. He spent most of the money on himself, on palaces and such like that. So they were not really prepared to fight a war with the U.S. And in fact, they fought a war with Iran. And you'll recall, we gave the United States, because Saddam Hussein was our dictator for a while, we gave him chemical weapons with which to bomb Iran and to use them against Iranian people. And when he was our guy, we were fine with that until he decided he wanted to be his own man and control his own oil. And then we said, oh, now we're going to kill you. And then we did that. So we've been playing around and messing around in this region forever. But Iran is not Iraq, friends. Those of you who are listening to this live, Iran is not Iraq. They have a major military, a big military, a much bigger population, and a cohesive population. And they are right near, look up to your left if you're looking at the screen, Turkey, a very important regional country. And they sit in a region and between Asia and Europe. They are in a very strategic place where lots of oil, to the point Nayyera made, goes through this thing called the Straits of Hormuz, which you really don't want them to mine or bomb. So this is bad. Can you talk a little bit, Nayyera, about the attempts by the Obama administration to do what really was a pretty successful deal that got Iran to walk back from the idea of having nukes, which, by the way, they want because Israel has nukes.
Right. And other people in the region have nukes, but the United States has always operated that there's the good guys can have nukes and the quote unquote bad guys can. And Russia's kind of been somewhere in between this whole time. And Russia's very friendly with Iran. In fact, with the Iran sanctions and the challenges they've had, they have sent their oil to Russia, and Russia's been selling that on the market. So Iran has been able to work this network that George Bush used to call the axis of evil. And, China's hanging out there as well. So this is Iran, again, capable, strategic. Their regional impact had been degraded. So this idea really became popular with regime change folks that, well, Iran is vulnerable right now. Now is the time to get them when they're vulnerable. Well, the reality is that they still have internally the military capabilities. They still have the network to be able to, again, create havoc. But to your point, about the nuclear deal, because Trump kept talking about wanting a deal, right? He said that he wanted to threaten strikes to have a deal happen. Before that, he was threatening strikes so that he could help the people of Iran, and he backed off of that. And apparently the nuclear program was destroyed in June with one bombing campaign. So I'm not quite sure what Trump thinks is really happening when it comes to a nuclear state in Iran. The reality is the negotiators have been trying to get back to the same deal that the United States had under the Obama administration. The same deal, which allowed for UN inspectors to come in to make sure that there were at any of these facilities that nothing was being done to create a nuclear bomb. There were limits on how much enrichment of uranium could be done. There were also many, many concessions and sanctions put on the people. There was transparency. It was never a deal that was meant to solve the challenge of the regime or to solve for the terrorism part. It was literally, we're going to make sure Iran does not get a nuclear bomb. Once Trump ripped that deal up in term one, Iran started doing whatever it wanted on the world stage. It's like, well, you broke the deal. This was a deal negotiated. They call it the P5+1, which means European partners plus Russia. Like they got Russia to put constraints on Iran. So now, no deal, no chance of a deal. A bombing campaign that now Russia gets to sit there and think, how can it use the United States overstretching itself in the Middle East? How can Russia use this to their advantage?
And we have to also note the other person. We did play a clip of Bibi Netanyahu's long campaign to try to get the United States to go to war using our military, our boots on the ground to overthrow the regime that threatens him, because it threatens the dominance of Israel in the region. If Iran were to get nukes, it would balance Israel. Israel would suddenly have mutually assured destruction with a country that could fight it on their same level. And they don't want that. And he's not wanted that and has wanted the U.S. to limit it. But I want to play for you when you talk about using it in one's interest. Jason, if we could pull A4, Bill Clinton last year in 2025 gave an interview in which he talked about the self-interest of Bibi Netanyahu in wanting a war in Iran and why he might want that. And here it is.
Mr. Netanyahu has long wanted to fight Iran because that way he can stay in office forever and ever. I mean, he's been there most of the last 20 years. But I think we should be trying to diffuse it. And I hope President Trump will do that. I hope anybody there will do that. We've got to stop. We've got to convince our friends in the Middle East that we'll stand with them and try to protect them. But choosing undeclared wars in which the primary victims are civilians who are not politically involved one way or the other, or just want to live decent lives, is not a very good solution. Do I think that we have to try to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon? I do. I tried at that, and we had some success. But we don't have to have all this outright, constant killing of civilians who can't defend themselves and they just want a chance to live.
Nayyera, can you talk about Bibi Netanyahu's self-interest here?
Well, Bibi he stays in power because he's considered a leader of war, right? His domestic economy has been suffering. He's been blamed for the fact that massive intelligence failures happened that did not predict or anticipate that Hamas was going to attack on October 7th. And so Bibi's also been under corruption charges and his own scandals coming up in front of Israeli Supreme Court. But when Israel is at war, as any country, when they're at war, people rally around the flag. So if there's actually anything that'll cement support for the regime just for the sake of civility, it's going to be the rally the flag effort will happen even in Iran. So this is 20 years what Bibi has been doing. He's been talking about the threat of the Palestinians, the threat of Iran, and now there's another reality here. Not only has Israel decimated and destroyed Gaza, but it has continued to move into the West Bank. The disputed territory, the territories that even belong to Palestinians, are no longer being paid attention to. Settlers move in. The right wing keeps attacking and kicking Palestinians out of their homes. So by focusing the rest of the world on a war in Iran, Bibi's going to get what he wants with the rest of the state of Israel and Palestine.
Indeed. And what you just said sounds like you could be describing Donald Trump, somebody who has an economy that is collapsing under his foolish tariffs, somebody who is losing the plot and losing even his base on the idea of ICE killing Americans, shooting Americans in the face and shooting an ICU nurse in order to kidnap people. He's underwater on immigration, underwater on the economy, and he's facing a very critical midterm election this year in which we keep hearing that he would like to declare some sort of an emergency. Well, what better emergency than a war? World War III might be a really interesting reason to have to suppress dissent, suppress the population of the United States, and maybe even mess with the election. I feel like Bibi and Trump are kind of doing the same thing, using the same victims, meaning Iran. And this is not to say, and I will say to the chats, that the Iranian regime are good people. I mean, they brutally suppress dissent in Iran. You can't speak out against the Iranian regime the way even we do here. That is a brutal regime, particularly toward women who refuse to veil or refuse to behave in the ways in which they want. So it's not like the Iranians are a good guy regime, but I haven't seen any of them ask for the United States or Israel, for God's sakes, to come in and overthrow their regime. What do you make of the parallels, even though I know you are a foreign policy analyst, between Mr. Netanyahu's legal situation, again, potential felon, and Donald Trump, already felon?
Well, Netanyahu hasn't been arrested. He's been brought to court and tried. Donald Trump's a convicted felon. Donald Trump also has a massive corruption scandal he's trying to distract from. And he's launched this war called Operation Epic Fury. Might as well call it Operation Epstein Fury. It's a distraction of massive import, massive consequences. And he's surrounded by people who've always loved the idea of regime change, but never the idea of taking any responsibility for the consequences. It's not as if that the Trump administration has a plan or is even coordinated with any of the anti-regime groups, right? It's this idea suddenly where you're like the anti-regime folks, the protesters are complaining about their house is terrible. It doesn't provide them with what they need or the resources they need. And this house is not good. It's not sustaining us. And Trump's answer is, great, we're just going to burn your house down. And by the way, now it's your turn to build it back up. Like, what kind of help is that? People are running. I heard Trump say, people of Iran, stay in your homes. How? Like indiscriminate bombing. Like how are you supposed to stay in your homes? And imagine now what this refugee crisis could lead to. When we already had the instability and the refugee crisis coming out of Syria, you saw where Iran sits. Where are people going to go? Like how does all of this has massive humanitarian consequences? But as a leader of the United States, that means you actually need to care about those consequences. You need to actually be thinking more than a month ahead. And that's the challenge, is we don't have a president who actually has a through line of what foreign policy should be or what the United States role should be in the world stage. I mean, he came in literally saying the United States was not going to get involved in foreign war, saying we need to get out of Afghanistan no matter what. And we saw what happened right, with that rapid withdrawal. It was terrible. And now somehow he's pulling out leaders from Venezuela while leaving regimes in place there, and unclear. Yes, he says this is regime change in Iran. Like, all right, so who's next? Who's coming up?
Unfortunately, the kind of rumor mill around what the regime in our country is doing is they are looking, if you can believe it, to the son of the Shah, the U.S. installed dictator who was forced upon the Iranian people in 1953, who then brutally suppressed his own country for 24 years until he was overthrown by the Ayatollah Khomeini and the revolution in 1979. They think the son of that guy, who is an exiled Iranian who would very much like to be king, they're saying, well, maybe you just don't have to wait to be king. Maybe we'll just redo what the Eisenhower administration did in the 50s. Maybe we'll just redo it. Do an overthrow of Khomeini, the current Ayatollah, and install the son of the former Shah. Oh, and that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Yeah, people use the word Shah as if that's anything other than a king. That's a monarch, right? Like it's a king. It's installing, and part of how this all went down was that Iran had a functioning democracy. The CIA wanted to have a footprint in the region separate from Saudi Arabia, was thinking it could play both sides, and installed the Shah. And so suddenly the Shah gets sick and he's starting to think that he doesn't have quite the support he does. The CIA was sending reports back to the State Department saying, hey, by the way, there's this political group out there. There's this guy, this Ayatollah, and he's really starting to get attention from a lot of these suburban regional spaces. And the State Department headquarters just ignored it. Like, oh, no, but we've got the king. We've got the king on our side. We're going to be good. We're going to be good. The second they bring the king to California for treatment, that's how this revolution happened. And so the irony is the United States not only saw it coming, but it prompted what happened next. The son of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, has never been to Iran. Right? He's very popular in the diaspora. Again, the people who fled with the Shah, but people who live in the country don't have an association with him. He can't speak for them in any meaningful way. But there is one thing that he might be useful for at this point, and that is there is a regard for the family. And he not being part of any one faction in Iran. There is this idea out there among some of the political folks that he could be a caretaker, temporary guy who brings parties together and is like a neutral negotiator. That's the best case scenario that we have here. But yeah, it's not like the United States has set anything up to be a new democratic republic of Iran.
Yeah, if it looks like I'm staring in Baby Dr. Duvalier, it's because I am. And when the U.S. decides the son of the former dictator might be better to replace an old dictator that was brutal, we'll just get the brutal son instead of the daddy. We tried that in Haiti. God help us, because in the case of Venezuela, we've effectively done the same thing. We've said, well, Maduro out, but his vice president in, along with the secret police and all the other people who are brutalizing Venezuelans. So you get no change, but the U.S. gets the resources. And the U.S. gets to control it.
And the U.S. gets the leader that they want to work with. But that's it. And that's what I find so, frankly, disgusting about American leaders helping the people of a country as the narrative, because they're not. It's very clear cut that this is about, if even it's about U.S. interests at this point, but I would argue that. But Trump's belief is that he just needs to install people that will work with him and do what he wants. Again, it's a very Putin type way of approaching the universe. And that's where he's learned his lessons of foreign policy are from Putin, not from the founding fathers or anybody else who cares about American democracy or democracy on the world stage.
It is pretty frightening because Donald Trump has talked about Iran in terms of real estate development. And, he did an interview with Sean Hannity in which he talked about the good old days when the U.S. and when his own family participated in real estate development and Iran was booming. And then the bad old days of the Ayatollah came along and all of that business dried up. And he was sort of waxing I'm nostalgic about being able to do real estate deals. One must assume, based on the fact that they're doing the same thing in Gaza, the so-called Board of Peace, I can tell you all in the chat now, working with FIFA, the soccer people, the international football folks, to talk about doing real estate development in Gaza to put football pitches in place of where people's homes used to be, where people of Gaza used to live. They're now viewing it as a vast potential real estate development where FIFA, which is also a deeply corrupt organization, come and build football pitches. So they're now already have their greedy eyes looking at Gaza as a place, not of just the devastation and death and genocide, but as an opportunity for the international real estate development community, the billionaires to come in and build. And it looks like Donald Trump looks at Iran the same way, Nayyera.
Yeah, the difference you have with Iran, let's not forget, it used to be called Persia and it used to be an empire. And that Correct. Is deeply embedded in the mythology and understanding, right? Like we talk about our founding fathers and Constitution, and that's only 250 years ago. That's 3,000 years of Persian history, right? We've seen 300, we've seen all the movies. So all of these MAGA people who walk around talking about, Roman Empire and the Greeks and trying to take on the mantle of that. Well, they lost to the Persian Empire. And Iran remembers that. The people remember that. That's part of the cultural history. This is not going to be one and done. This is not going to be resolved this week, next week, or who knows when. And we just went into this in the most dramatic way possible without any plan for what comes next.
I will note just for the chats that Iran has never been a colony. It was not colonized by any European country. So Iran are a free people. They're not a colonized people, and they're not a people who are willing to be colonized. As Nayyera said, they were an empire. There was a thing called the Persian Empire. They are a cohesive, proud people. And despite living under a dictatorial system, what they're not going to do is live under Donald Trump as their new Ayatollah. He's not going to be able to hand Marco Rubio yet another job to be like the new baby Ayatollah of Iran. If you think you're just going to colonize Iran the way that all of these other peoples around the world have been colonized, they really should read a book because Iran, they ain't that country. Nayyera Haq, I so appreciate you taking the time to be here. I'm going to release you to have your day, and unless there's anything else that I've forgotten that that you'd like to throw in at the end.
Well, no, Joy, I just appreciate that you're talking about the real issues and giving all of us a chance to put it in the context of history and past mistakes. Donald Trump thinks about all of this, as I said, in real estate, and also from what he remembers, maybe in his 20s or 30s as his heyday. I'm like, yeah, y'all, you're 80 right now. Like, you need to move on, do something else, because there's a whole generation of us who came up against the backdrop of the forever wars, and our economy has suffered for it. Like, we can't afford to buy houses. We've got crazy student loans. Like, we got real challenges we need to be dealing with here in the US, and Iran hasn't done anything directly to us that we need to award them.
Amen, amen, amen. Nayyera Haq, thank you very much. I appreciate you. I will see you again on Monday. We're going to do this all again on Monday, and I will see you Monday night. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend with your family. Thank you very much. I will note that MAGA folks are not reacting well to the attack on Iran. Donald Trump is taking heat for having done this from a lot of his own base, who are saying that this is not what they wanted. Marjorie Taylor Greene, let me read you her tweet. I did not campaign for this. I did not donate money for this. I did not vote for this in elections or Congress. This is heartbreaking and tragic, and how many more innocents will die? What about our own military? This is not what we thought MAGA was supposed to be. Shame. Let me add, let's go to Andrew Tate, the manosphere leader, son of an African-American chess master, but who also leads the pretty gross manosphere, been accused of sexual abuse and assault along with his brother. So not exactly a good guy, but tweeted in all caps, nobody wants this war. Then added, war transfers wealth from the working class to the banking class. So does fraud and inflation. The working class man simply can't catch a break and is endlessly wrecked. This is the matrix, extraction from the populace to feed a machine-minded host, heartless. People are reposting an old Charlie Kirk tweet from back in 2025. And this was after the first sort of bombing, the sort of lighter somewhat bombing, where the Trump regime bombed the nuclear facilities, supposedly obliterating them, which makes this entire enterprise supposedly unnecessary. At that time, right-winger Charlie Kirk had tweeted, "This is insane, regime change," which Lindsey Graham at the time was calling for. So he reposted Lindsey Graham saying, hey, now that we bombed the nuclear facilities, why don't we do regime change? He said, this is insane. Regime change will result in a bloody civil war, killing hundreds of thousands and creating another massive Muslim refugee crisis. Toppling a leader is never as easy as you think. It almost always results in further involvement, a civil war, and chaos. Resist this. Note that for the far right, one of the things you heard Nayyera Haq mention is what they fear. When we invaded Iraq and when we've gotten involved in wars in Syria and Libya, you know what happens? People flee those countries and they wind up going west, and they wind up in Europe, creating refugee crises in countries like Germany, in places like France. And when they go to those European countries, inevitably you get a resistance to that from their version of MAGA, their far right, and all they can see is brown people incoming. If you go ahead and start a war in Iran, people may leave that country, just as people have attempted to leave Gaza as they're being bombarded by Israel. And then they wind up showing up in the West. And then people in the West who are of the far right get mad because why are all these brown people here? They're here because we're bombing their countries and making their homes unlivable. There's never been a good outcome from waging war in this region, and there won't be a good outcome now. We need some expertise. Joining me now, in addition to Nayyera Haq, we appreciate Nayyera's expertise. Let's get some even further expertise from Trita Parsi, founder of the Quincy Institute, and somebody that I have been sort of furiously, obsessively texting on today. So I apologize. Myself and my team have been chasing you down, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Joy.
Please tell us what we're facing here, and what do you know of whether it is accurate as the U.S. regime and the Israelis regime is saying that that Ayatollah Khamenei is actually dead? Is that true to your knowledge?
We don't know yet. And again, when the Israelis said that, obviously we should have a lot of skepticism. Trump confirmed it, which must have been based on some level of U.S. validation or confirmation. But in June of last year, when the Israelis started this war in the first go around, we were also told that Ali Shamkhani was a very senior figure, had been killed, and for days that was believed to be true, had been confirmed, etc., etc. And a week later, he just popped up. Turns out that he had been in hospital throughout this period. So I think we should be very careful until we get further confirmation. Now, of course, the Iranian government has a tremendous reason to deny this at this point, and they would probably not announce anything until they have a complete secession plan and announcement, everything ready. But I think at this point, we just don't know.
And what would be, in your mind, the implications? I mean, this is an act of war. We have declared war on a sovereign country that did not attack us, and alongside Israel have attacked their civilians. This girls' school attack, we played the video earlier when we first started the live, is horrific. We're hearing 85 dead at minimum at this point. So we're killing their civilians. What are the implications that we should expect?
I think the next 48 to 72 hours is going to be crucial. I think if it is true that Khamenei has been killed, Trump is obviously going to try to use that in order to find a quick exit out of this. We already see in his Truth Social post that he's been saying that, you know, the Iranian army should defect, IRGC should defect, and essentially the people should take over. So he's hoping to see a regime implosion, declare victory, and then stop this and again, achieve what he wants, which is to never be engaged in any of these things in a prolonged way, not avoid a quagmire, which he's very sensitive about. But if it turns out that whether Khamenei is dead or not, that this doesn't happen, you're going to see the U.S. side significantly intensify the bombardment, I suspect, and the Iranians as well. And they've already gone beyond what many people thought. They've been attacking all 5 states, all 5 out of 6 states in the GCC. The bases of the U.S. in those countries. But in the case of Dubai, we've seen several attacks that also go against other targets there that are not American targets. So we're seeing that the Iranian strategy is to expand the war, expand the theater of war, and make this as costly and challenging as possible for the United States. If that strategy succeeds, then the game essentially is to make sure that they do drag the Trump into a quagmire that ends up becoming a loss for him, that the American public starts rallying against it, his own base starts rallying against this, and that essentially Trump would be forced to back down, but a new scenario would have been created in which Trump no longer would have that type of a credible threat against Iran because he used it and it did not work out as well as he thought. That's the Iranian calculation. Plenty of things can happen between these two extreme variations of what the future will look like.
So first of all, just for those who are not familiar, what is the GCC?
The Gulf Cooperation Council is the 6 countries in the Persian Gulf that are Arab states. And all of them, except for Oman, have been attacked by the Iranians in retaliation. And the attacks have been against U.S. bases there. The U.S. has plenty of bases, as you know, around the world, about 17 or 19 of them in the Persian Gulf or in the larger Middle East area.
So talk about what would be the relationship of Iran to the region pre this, right? We know, obviously, they are Persian. Most of the region, other than Israel, are Arab. And there is tension between Saudi Arabia and Iran, sort of jockeying for sort of who are the leaders sort of the kind of Muslim world on that side. But does Iran have allies in the region other than those terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas?
Iran really does not have any allies beyond some of those different groups. But its relations with some of these states are not bad. I mean, they have pretty good relations with Oman, Qatar as well, although of course the Qataris are still upset that they got hit last time when the US struck Iran. The Iranians retaliated against the US base in Qatar. On Saudi Arabia, there's been a significant warming between the two sides, but all of this is now going to change, not just because the Iranians have struck back against them, but also because, one, the idea that the GCC countries are this oasis of stability in the Middle East has now completely been blown up. So much of the wealth and the benefit there is because of the sense that these are very stable, calm countries, and that's no longer the case. Because they get dragged into these wars, whether they like it or not, and of course they don't like it. But also because they put so much of their eggs in the American security basket, and they had these American bases there, ostensibly to protect them from Iran, to deter Iran from attacking. But it seems like the Iranians didn't attack these states despite the bases, they attacked them because of the bases. Mm-hmm. So the presence of these bases may actually have made these countries less secure. So I think going forward, we're going to see a lot of changes, both in the relationship between Iran and the GCC states, the stability of the GCC states, but also the relationship between these countries and their security relations with the United States.
What about, to sort of zoom out from beyond the region, China and Russia? Because Iran has warm relationships with Russia. My presumption is they have decent relationships with China. To the point you just made, at some point, do these countries start saying, we're better off being friends with China? No one's going to attack, our bases because of China, the relationship with China. China seems like it has a more rational, stable government and leadership than the United States. They're becoming sort of the preferred partner around the world because we destabilize the world much more than they do. They're a much sort of safer bet. Are we potentially, because of what Trump has done, further driving nations in the region to befriend China instead of us?
All of these states are going to try to have close relations with China because of the economic might that it now has. But China is not interested in providing security to these states. It's not interested in dragging itself in that mess. It's actually very cleverly stayed out of all of these different things. Sure, they'll send weapons systems to these countries, etc., but their weapon systems doesn't come with some sort of implicit guarantee that the Chinese would defend them if they're under attack, whereas the manner in which the US sells weapons is with a very explicit guarantee, at least an understood one, that if they get attacked, the US has some sort of obligation to support them. So they're not just buying the weapons, oftentimes they're actually buying US protection, not the weapons. Mm-hmm. The Chinese are not playing that game, so they're staying out of that. So some of these states are going to really think through more carefully how they're going to approach things. They're not going to give up on the United States. I don't think that is in the cards. They're still going to keep that. The question is, to what degree do they diversify away from just having all of their eggs in the American security basket?
And can we talk about the thing that I think a lot of people in the chat, a lot of people who are watching this and who are following this on social media are concerned about, is the possibility of terrorism impacting us in the United States or places where we travel? You have a blue passport. Are you less safe now? Should we expect Iran to respond by activating Hezbollah or some of these other terrorist cells that they have communication with and maybe even control over?
It's a bit outside of my area of expertise, Joy, but I would just say it seems to me that much of Iran's network in terms of those type of activities was dismantled under the Khatami years about 25 years ago. We've not seen that the Iranians have been able to do or even tried to do much of this. We've seen some, accusations here and there, but nothing that actually has proven to be really true or effective. We had a case about 15 years ago when the Israelis were assassinating Iranian scientists, that the Iranians tried to retaliate against the Israelis, kept on failing because the Israeli security was just too strong at their various embassies. And eventually it appears that the Iranians struck through some proxy Israeli tourists, a much softer target in Bulgaria. And that in and of itself, I think, tells you that what they have become known for, or perhaps very negatively known for is a capacity that they just don't seem to have any longer. Now, would that be changed going forward, that they're going to go back to some of those old paths because of this war? I don't know. I don't find that to be very likely in the short run. I do think that what we're seeing in the region is where they're putting most of their strategy, which is that they're trying to expand the war in the region, make sure that this war becomes devastating for oil markets, for global markets, shoot up inflation in the United States, and by that just make it as costly for Trump to having started this war in the first place.
And one of the things they could do, obviously, is close the Straits of Hormuz, right? I mean, if they were to bomb or mine that immediately impacts oil prices because you can't move oil through there. Are there other things they could do strategically like that?
Well, it seems like they already have started to do this, and they don't have to mime it any longer. At this point, they just need to shoot missiles at the ships, as the Houthis did, and that's sufficient to make sure that no one even tries to go through. They could also start targeting oil installations throughout the region. They will particularly do that if the U.S. starts targeting Iranian oil facilities. So unfortunately, both sides have various ways of further escalating this. The question is, what is the de-escalatory exit out of this? What is the pathway to actually end this? And that's where things get much, much more unclear.
Well, it becomes unclear, with Donald Trump. Usually the de-escalatory way is how do you pay him, right? But Bibi Netanyahu seems to be a much different case. He's been trying to get a U.S. regime to go to war with Iran for 30 years. He finally found someone in Trump who's willing to do it. For him, there is no de-escalatory option, right? He wants a war.
Yeah, no, he's got in his war, he's got the U.S. deeply involved in it. If the U.S., for instance, at this point would try to de-escalate by saying the Khamenei is dead and now they kind of withdraw from this whole thing, the Israelis would continue to bomb, and they would do everything they could to make sure that the U.S. would do so as well. In fact, look what happened when Assad fell in Syria. According to the Israelis themselves, within 20 minutes, they turned the entire country into a shooting range, blowing everything up to make sure that the next regime, whoever would come to power, would not have an ability to pose the slightest challenge to Israel's domination and hegemony in the region.
Just to talk about Bibi Netanyahu for just a moment.
Joy, I'm so sorry. I do have to drop off in a minute or two.
No worries, no worries. I will keep you for one more minute and then I will let you go. For you, is there a way to separate Donald Trump? Have you seen any strategic way to put daylight between Netanyahu and Trump, given that he's so influential over him?
There is, and we have seen moments in which there's been clear daylight and Trump has acted on it. The problem is he never sustains it. Back in the June war, the Israelis wanted Trump to continue to bomb. They didn't just want to see a bombing of 1 or 2 nuclear facilities. They wanted the U.S. to fully engage, and Trump didn't. The Israelis obviously didn't want to have the ceasefire. At this point, it's not much of a ceasefire, but nevertheless, Trump pushed that onto them. But whenever he does it, very quickly thereafter, he starts letting up the pressure on Israel, and eventually the Israelis manage to transform whatever decision he forced onto them into nothing. And what we've seen here as well is the same thing. After June, he claimed that he had obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. Everyone knew it was a lie, but it was something that he was saying to say, this topic, this issue is off my desk. It's resolved. I'm not going to deal with it any longer. Well, 6 months later, Netanyahu comes back to the White House, and there we are. Once again, Trump is falling for it. So even when he does push back, he doesn't sustain it, and Netanyahu finds a way to come back in.
Trita Parsi, no greater expert on this region. Thank you very much. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day. And there we have it, everyone. Thank you. Donald Trump cannot escape from the grasp of Bibi Netanyahu. Every time it seems that he has escaped from his grasp, he simply falls back in. And it really does beg the question, right? It begs the question for me, why is it that Donald Trump cannot resist doing whatever it is that Netanyahu says? As I've mentioned before, Netanyahu has tried to get president after president after president to do what he says, to obey him and start a war in the region with Iran and also with Iraq. Jason, if you can pull A5, this was the last time that Bibi Netanyahu was successful in convincing an American president to do a war in the region that he wanted, but that he wanted U.S. troops to fight for him.
Whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. And there is no question that once he acquires it, history shifts immediately.
That was a lie. Saddam Hussein did not have nuclear weapons. What he did have were chemical weapons. And the reason we know they had chemical weapons is that the US gave him chemical weapons. When Saddam Hussein was our dictator, doing our bidding and operating the way we wanted, we effectively backed him in his war against Iran. You will recall that Iran and Iraq went to war and the US was on the side of Iraq. We gave him chemical weapons with which to bomb Iran. Iraq was not able, even with US military support and chemical weapons we gave him, not able to defeat Iran. Because again, Iran is a much more formidable country than Iraq. Its military is more formidable and their society was more cohesive and formidable. They were not willing to be defeated by the little duchy colony created by Europe in their region. And so Iran won. Effectively, they fought them to a stalemate despite we having given chemical weapons. When we came back to Iraq after Saddam Hussein, who was in the minority sect, he wasn't even a proper Sunni, he was an Alawite Sunni, which is a tiny sect of Sunni. So he was considered not like the most of the country. He was a minority government, basically. The majority of the country are Shiites, and this Sunni Alawite was leading them, and they considered him an apostate and didn't want him to be their leader. And so when he decided that he wasn't going to play ball with the United States anymore, and we decided to knock him off, blaming him for having the weapons we gave him, and then lying and saying he also was developing nuclear weapons, which he wasn't, the people who wound up taking over Iraq effectively were Iran. The main Ayatollah, the sort of baby Ayatollah in Iran, became the main Ayatollah of Iraq because we basically handed Iraq over to Iran by fighting them. And all we got out of it were refugees and the existence of something called ISIS, a terrorist group that was created because after we tortured people and put Iraqis in gulags in their own country, and left them to languish there, the people who came out of those gulags formed ISIS. They became, or ISIL, as sometimes they're called, because the Levant is the L in ISIS, right? So we effectively are the reason that there's an ISIS, a terrorist group that came out of the gulags we created when we were torturing Iraqis to try to get them to lie and claim that their dictator, Saddam Hussein, had nukes. We also tortured people in Guantanamo Bay prison to try to get them to lie and cover up the lie that Iraq had nuclear weapons, which they didn't.
Aren't there a lot of people still there?
Of course, we still have people
there
in Guantanamo Bay because we can't try them because we tortured them. And once you torture people, you can't put them on trial because everything they say, they said through torture. So they're untriable. They simply have to languish in our gulag in Cuba and Guantanamo Bay forever. And Bibi Netanyahu has been playing us since then. He played us into a war in Iraq that we never should have engaged in, that had nothing to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda because once again, he was not a Sunni of the sect of the Al-Qaeda people who were Sunni extremists. He was an Alawite who they considered an apostate. They would have never allied with him. They would have chopped his head off if they'd gotten their hands on Saddam Hussein. But we pretended that this Alawite Sunni from a small sect, they considered him, again, that he was partnering with Al-Qaeda, which just wasn't true. But we tortured people to try to make that seem true, to get people to say it was true. George W. Bush was the idiot American president who did that, who got suckered in part by Bibi Netanyahu to attack Iraq. And now you've had this new fool, Donald Trump, allow Bibi Netanyahu, after 6 visits, every other month he was in the White House yapping in the ear of Donald Trump. And so now our president, through whatever it is that Bibi Netanyahu was able to whisper in his ear, has now put us in the position of going to war with not Iraq, but the country that Iraq could not defeat even with our chemical weapons, a country that is They've never been subjugated. They are an unsubjugated former empire. Let me play for you Jeffrey Sachs. He's a Columbia University professor who is an expert in the region, and he has some thoughts about why we're doing this. And Jason, this is A6, if we could.
Never been about nuclear weapons. This has been about regional hegemony in the Middle East. Israel wants to topple the Iranian regime, period. It has said so. This is not a mystery. This is not my claim. This is Israeli policy repeated year in, year out. The whole idea that Trump is negotiating to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, that was negotiated. Trump ripped it up. The Iranians have come back every year to say, we don't want a nuclear weapon. We want negotiations. The United States does not accept yes for an answer because it works for the government of Israel. This is the point. Why does it work for the government of Israel? It's a little hard to understand. Maybe because it's of Mike Hucklebee's parishioners, because of people who read the Bible and say, okay, that's our foreign policy. That's possible. It may be because of what's in the Epstein files that haven't been released. It may be blackmail. It may be corruption. It may be many other things, but it is not about America's interests. We have no interest whatsoever in going to a war with Iran right now. Yeah, if there is such a war, it's a war because Israel has told the United States what to do. And that raises a question. Why has the United States done what Israel has told the United States to do for 30 years? And I don't just mean about Iran. I mean across the Middle East.
It is the question. Israel is, in theory, our client state. We fund their education system. We fund their healthcare system. We fund their military. We provide them the bombs with which they have committed genocide. We provided the military equipment with which Bibi Netanyahu has committed war crimes. We give them the money that sustains everything about their nation and their economy and their regional hegemony in the Middle East. And yet it appears that the tail is now wagging the dog. It appears that we are the client, they are the boss, that they are the trainer, and Trump is the trainee. Trump is the apprentice. And I do not understand why. Israel, to the comment there, wants to be the superpower in the region. And the biggest two threats to their hegemony are Saudi Arabia and Iran. Because Saudi Arabia, like Dubai and some of these other countries, have endless wealth. They have endless oil wealth. And they also have talked about and styled themselves as potentially becoming nuclear. And so has Iran, which again is the former Persian Empire and sees itself as its own leadership, potential leader in the region. And despite the fact that most of the region are Arab and not Persian, they are also the seat of Shia Islam, which you might note, Iran is the land of order, but Iran or Iraq, somewhere in that region is where Abraham came from. So they have some claim to being the home, the land of Abraham. Abraham came from the land of order, and most archaeologists believe that the land of order is somewhere between Iraq and Iran. So they feel they have as strong a claim as anyone to leadership in the region. There are people in the chat saying Putin is running Trump. Well, somebody's running Trump, but it is not. I don't see Putin's interest in the U.S. attacking Iran. I certainly, you could explain it to me, somebody might be able to. But the person, the figure who has wanted a war with Iran for much of my adult life that he's been a public figure is Bibi Netanyahu. It is the Likud party. It is Israel. And he has found a way. I don't know if it is, as Jeffrey Sachs said, is it something in the Epstein files? Is he reminding Trump when he comes to these visits what they have, what they know? because there is no American interest in going to war with Iran. There is nothing that the United States gets out of going to war with Iran. They cannot colonize Iran. Poor Gaza, Donald Trump and apparently FIFA and Israel are going to turn it into a giant real estate and soccer development. And those poor people are going to be rounded up into refugee camps, if not forced to leave altogether. They're going to take the West Bank and completely colonize it. And apparently there's nothing anyone can do. That is what Israel wants. They're going to do what they like. There is no U.S. interest. The U.S. is not going to colonize Iran because Iran will not allow it. If you think you can just walk in there and create a colony in Iran, though, they remember that we imposed the Shah on them. I doubt we're going to be able to reimpose another king on them. I doubt it. And if we tried to occupy Iran the way we occupied Iraq, understand the number of hundreds of thousands of troops that would take, and we were not able to occupy Iraq successfully. We failed to try to occupy Iraq, which is far smaller, more disorganized, and had much more internecine conflict than Iran.
And it's not like they don't have the internet to know what's going on around the world. They are modern people just like we are.
And with their modernity, there was an inability of the people who and I'm sure the CIA was in there stoking revolution against the Ayatollahs to try to get them to overthrow that government. There have been resistance movements. I've interviewed people on my previous show on the artist formerly known as MSNBC, people who are resisting the Iranian regime, women, young people who want freedom, who want to go back to the time when Iran was a modern country where you could go to the cafe, have a date with a boy, where you could live a normal life. They don't want to live under a religious dictatorship like sort of an Iranian version of Project 2025. They don't want to live that way. But there's never been a successful attempt by the U.S. to impose regime change on that country and force them to overthrow the regime. With all of our power, the CIA, with all of their access to the internet, the attempted sort of green revolution, I believe it was called, when they tried it in 2011, it didn't work. The Iranian regime is pretty strong. They're not going to occupy it. If we tried to occupy it militarily, can you imagine American troops being forced to physically occupy Iran? They weren't even able to successfully occupy Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles and Minneapolis. You're now going to send U.S. troops to occupy. Is that what we're doing? Is that what you signed up for, MAGA? Is that what you voted for? Marjorie Taylor Greene said that's not what she voted for. War with Iran was not the peace president that I think even MAGA asked for. And Mike Huckabee was mentioned. He is the U.S. ambassador to Israel. And if you have not yet seen Tucker Carlson's interview with him, I would recommend perusing it, because in that interview, he said that he would be fine with Israel taking control of all of the land that in the Bible was promised between the Tigris and the Euphrates and the Mediterranean. That would mean Israel would get Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, parts of Iran, and parts of Iraq. And he said he wouldn't have a problem with them taking it all, cause a diplomatic uproar. The video that you're watching right now, Jason, is this, where is this? This is Dubai?
Yeah, that's in Dubai.
That's in Dubai. So the reactions to the U.S. Israeli strikes are now happening. This is in Dubai. You're seeing the destruction that was caused by the retaliatory strikes, because Iran is not just attacking U.S. bases. In some places, they're attacking them everywhere. This now is some protests near the White House. You can put the sound up. We can listen to that just a little bit. This is some of the protests you're seeing near the White House.
Which serves no one but politicians and their corporate backers. They're sending Americans to die on behalf of the rich. Americans have made it clear that they do not want another war.
The U.S. has been tinkering with this idea. Remember back when Senator John McCain did the joke during the 2008 election where he said, bomb, 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 bomb Iran. Americans are after what we saw. Oh, wait, hold on, Jason. Are you going to play that now? Okay, well, I'll play it in 1 second. When
Oh, my bad.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Play the background.
No, that's okay. Because I definitely want to play. I want to hear that because that is the United Nations. Back in the 2004 era, you heard Nayyera talk about the axis of evil. George W. Bush and the neoconservatives at the time were talking about taking out an axis of evil. Project, what was the name of this thing that was talking about doing 3 simultaneous wars? And the idea would be to take out Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. That was supposedly the axis of evil that the sort of OG neoconservatives believe we should take them all out.
Why aren't they attacking North Korea then? Because wasn't they a part of the axis of evil?
They have nukes.
I get it.
And they have a 1 million man military or 2 million man military. They're not going to try that. They have long range missiles that could reach the United States.
They're not working out too well in Ukraine right now.
No, but here's the reality. And this is the reason countries want to go nuclear. I'm glad that you made that point, Jason, because there are 2 countries that used to have nukes that let them go willingly. One is South Africa. When South Africa was run by the white minority government, they were a nuclear country that Israel helped to give nuclear weapons to. Israel got nukes during the 1960s, despite President John F. Kennedy warning them that they should not. They had no right to have nukes. They got them anyway. Once they had them, they helped the colonizers in South Africa, who were their ally. Israel was the United States and Israel were to the end allies of white South Africa. The white South African government had 2 allies left at the end, the United States up through the Reagan administration and the Israeli government, because they saw a sameness in their settler movement in all 3 countries. All 3 countries were created by settler colonialism. And they used to acknowledge that they had that bond of settler colonialism. It wasn't something that was considered a diss to talk about Israeli settler colonialism because they acknowledged that they were settlers. They used to call themselves colonizers, colonists. And so did we have that here, settler colonialism, and so did we have that in South Africa. And these 3 settler colonial nations were allies to the bitter end. And all 3 countries were nuclear powers who wanted and styled themselves as global leaders through, in part, the use of their nuclear weaponry. And they also styled themselves as being able to tell who could have nukes and who could not. Another country that had nuclear weapons at that time was Ukraine, because Ukraine, when it was part of the Soviet Union, was where most of the Soviet nuclear arsenal lived. It was physically in Ukraine.
And I bet they wish they didn't give those up
Correct.
either.
When they broke off from the Soviet Union and became an independent country, one of the deals they struck in order for Russia to let them go and to release them and let them be their own country, they agreed that if they could be their own country, number 1, they would not join NATO, and number 2, they would give up their nukes. And they allowed their nukes to be dismantled and sent into into Russia. Are they better off for having given up their nukes? Hell to the no. If they still had nukes, Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine. And this is why we try to talk about these nations around the world as if they're all irrational. All nations are survivors, and these regimes all want to survive. There's a reason that Iran has fiddled with the idea of getting nukes. There's a reason that Saudi Arabia has fiddled with the idea of getting nukes, because they live next to an expansionist regime whose idea of Eretz Israel, greater Israel, could in theory include grabbing parts of their countries, expanding. The dream of an Eretz, greater Israel, expands into Jordan and Syria and maybe Saudi Arabia and maybe Iraq, Iran. This is the reason that these other countries say, well, we better get nukes because we need to protect ourselves against this expansionist country that freely bombs outside its borders, that freely attacks civilians in Gaza, that freely snatches land in Syria, Golan Heights, that freely goes into Lebanon and for a while occupied parts of Lebanon to try to take it for themselves, for their settlers. They live in a region with an expansionist power that has a big brother who always is willing to fight for them in the UN and beat butts for them and hurt people for them. And that's us, the United States, who will never turn on them and who will let them do whatever they want. we are as permissive toward Israel as the Supreme Court is permissive toward Donald Trump. Think how insecure we feel knowing that we don't have protection from even our Supreme Court or our Congress from a president who does whatever he wants and brags he can do whatever he wants. But we are that to Israel. They get to do whatever they want, hurt whoever they want, take whatever land they want, kill whoever they want, massacre whoever they want, commit any genocide they want. And we, whether it's Democrats in charge or Republicans, do nothing, no matter which party is in power in the United States. Because we have AIPAC, we have lobbyists, and we have people, honestly, who are both Jewish and Christian Zionists, people like Mike Huckabee in the Christian Zionist movement. And Bibi Netanyahu has been very, very slick about constantly keeping the Christian Zionists in play, constantly letting them know we're on the same side and that you need to let us do what we want, keep arming us, keep giving us money. And they've gotten the Democrats and the Republicans to go along with it. They're free bird. They do whatever they want. No one will say no to them, just like no one will say no to Trump. And so as long as if you're in that region, if I'm the Saudis or I'm the Iranians and I want to survive, knowing that they feel free to bomb inside my country and kill 85 kids at a girls' school, and they feel no way about it. They have no restraint. They feel no restraint about bombing a girls' school inside of a sovereign country or bombing the nuclear facilities inside a sovereign country. Wouldn't you want nukes?
That's right. And then they're going to put up some excuse about it was a mistake. They didn't mean to do it.
Like they say in Gaza, we bombed this school, but it was Hamas's fault because Hamas is nearby. Hamas is using them as human shields. Was this school human shields being used? We're going to now hear where I stand and wait for the excuse from the Israeli regime that the school was just a front for the Iranian military. The school was just a front for the Iranian evil revolutionaries, and we had to do it because it's human shields. Human shield. And then we're going to get that excuse. Let's play the UN Secretary General now, Jason, reacting to the U.S. and Israel making an act of war against Iran.
I warmly welcome the Secretary General, His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and I give him the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I will speak directly to three areas today: the principles, the facts, and the way out. First, the principles. The UN Charter provides the foundation for the maintenance of international peace and security. Article 2 of the Charter clearly states, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. International law and international humanitarian law must always be respected. That is why since this morning I have condemned the massive military strikes by the United States and Israel against Iran. And I also condemned the subsequent attacks by Iran violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. We are witnessing a grave threat to international peace and security. Military action carries the risk of igniting a chain of events that no one can control in the most volatile region of the world. Let me be clear, there is no viable alternative to the peaceful settlement of international disputes. Lasting peace can only be achieved through peaceful means, including genuine dialogue and negotiations.
I mean, I appreciate Mr. Guterres' statement, but this is one of those moments when you really have to confront the flaccidity of the United Nations. The whole idea of the United Nations and the reason that the United States created it, that's why it's in New York, is that it was supposed to prevent further war. It was created after World War II so that there would never be a World War III, because we would have this body that would allow us to peacefully settle international disputes, as you just heard Mr. Guterres say. Well, what international disputes has it prevented? We've had the Rwanda genocide since the UN was created, the genocide in Gaza, the genocide in Congo is ongoing, the genocide in Sudan, ongoing. Herzegovina and Bosnia happened while the UN existed. That did not stop that slaughter of Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We've not seen any impact. Nothing has stopped Bibi Netanyahu. He's a war criminal who gets to fly and land in the country that created the United Nations, and no one will arrest him. No one can stop him. Israel attacked Ukraine. What is the purpose at this point of the UN? Because they can give a statement, a strongly worded statement. That's not stopping the United States. The creator of the UN is now openly violating international law. And who is going to stop him, boo? Who's going to check him, boo? Who's going to stop Donald Trump?
To be fair, Troy, to be fair to the UN, though, America has been basically doing a war since September 11th, unilaterally, without asking anybody, not even the Congress.
Yeah.
That's the power that needs to be taken away, because the president can basically go to war whenever he wants to and doesn't have to tell anybody anything. So we can't be too hard on the UN. We have to basically change the laws here.
We absolutely. And people who are asking in the chats on both Substack and on YouTube, unfortunately, I cannot see the chats on Facebook, and they're asking, where is Congress? Good question, because presidents are not supposed to be able to declare war. The Article 1 power, if we go back to the Constitution once again, Article 1 is the Congress. And there's a reason that these so-called brilliant framers, who turn out not to be so brilliant, made Congress Article 1. It's supposed to be the most powerful of the three branches of government. It's the government branch that's closest to the people, particularly the House of Representatives, whose leader, the Speaker of the House, is third in line to the presidency. There's a reason that the House is supposed to be the most popular, because it's closest to the people. Your district is small, and it is the small sort of microcosm of your state, which is big, the next step. Then you've got the president, who is the president of the whole country. So it's like one big giant state. And then you've got the Supreme Court, which is supposed to oversee. But as I think it was Crystal Ball who said this the other day, that it turns out that the more distant the American body is from the people, the more power they have. Whoever said that on the show the other day, that was so poignant, because it turns out that the most powerful might be it might have been Janae Nelson, that the most powerful turns out to be the Supreme Court, who's the most distant. They have jobs for life. They can never be voted out. They can't be removed. They can stay on until they're 100, or they die on their own by the will of God. And they get to wave their arms and and confer to the president. They're like the hand of the king. They've allowed the president to run wild, and they say, let him do what he wants, because 6 of them are monarchists and who want a king, a Shah of America, which is what Trump is acting like. Then you've got the Congress, which is supposed to be the next closest to the people. The senators are literally all running around to AIPAC fundraisers and ignoring everything Trump does and doing strongly worded letters and holding hearings sometimes. But those hearings don't result in anything changing. Then you've got the Republicans in the United States Senate that are like, let Trump do tariffs. I know that's our job, but what you gonna do? And then you go to the House, where the speaker is supposed to be this powerful figure who's basically made himself the employee of the president of the United States. Mike Johnson can't run fast enough to take a pillow and put it under Trump's ass. He can't run fast enough to massage Trump's shoulders and ask him, sir, please, sir, what would you like me to do, sir? He literally is the butler of the president of the United States. The Congress is the only body constitutionally prescribed to declare war. We can't just have the president declare war on Iran, but that's what we've done. The president of the United States, without Congress's authority and approval, committed an act of war on a sovereign nation that did literally nothing to us. What is the casus belli, the fancy Latin word for the cause of this war? What did Iran do? Yeah, they oppressed their own people. I don't remember them being able to declare war because people oppress their own people. Trump is oppressing us.
Ask Preddy and freaking the Miss Good, how does oppression feel? They can't answer it.
I just learned, we won't go into what we're running. We have right now a country in which if you are trans, in the state of, is it Kansas, that just said you have to turn in your driver's license because they're no longer going to honor it. You get kicked out of the United States military. If you are a protester against ICE, they are putting you in a database so that later on they can maybe declare you to be a terrorist. If you physically protest ICE, you can be thrown on the ground, brutalized, beaten, and arrested in the United States. You might get shot in the face, or you might get shot down dead in the street, like a deer in the woods on hunting season, like Alex Preddy did, like Renee Nicole Good did. You might get shot by an off-duty ICE agent just because you shoot a gun in the air on New Year's Eve. I feel we're being oppressed. You can get fired from your government job simply because you're Black and they've said DEI is bad and they think that means Black people. So you just get laid off. You can be forced out of your job as a scientist working for the United States government simply because you're a woman or because you didn't vote for Trump. We're being oppressed. We're being oppressed. So if China decided to come in and start bombing Washington, D.C. and Georgetown and blew up a school in Philadelphia and killed 85 children and started bombing American cities to liberate us so that we will overthrow Trump, and they then say, and they post the thing, where's his statement, Jason? This is A11. Trump posts this insane, lengthy statement on Truth Social, which boils down to, I have liberated you. Go now and overthrow your government.
The demons are working against us. He doesn't want to show Trump's
Starlink said, no.
There you go.
Well, good. We don't have to show him. I'll just tell you what he said. He does this lengthy statement where he effectively says, go now that I have liberated you from the Ayatollah and overthrow your government. Okay, let's say that those of us who feel oppressed by Trump, would we appreciate it if China decided to liberate us and started bombing inside the United States and say, hey, I'm just here to liberate y'all. Go ahead and overthrow Trump. He is oppressing you. He is calling you terrorists. He is shooting y'all in the face. He is throwing you out of your jobs and making you poor. He is taking away your Medicaid. He's taking away your Medicare. He's closing your hospitals if you live in rural America. He's punishing you if you are an immigrant. He's stealing people in the middle of the day and throwing them into vans.
He's robbing Georgia for their voting rights.
He's stealing your votes. He's hijacking your ballots. We literally live in a country with the secret police. We live in an autocracy, an authoritarian country where we cannot guarantee you that your vote will be respected in November. We are not sure if you're going to have to vote with guns in your face, with ICE agents in mass staring you down in the polls. We presume we're going to be voting as if we live in a country at war. That is oppression. We're being oppressed. But if China were to start bombing us in order to liberate us from Trump, who is a dictator, that would be an act of war, and we would resist China. We don't want Chinese troops in our streets supposedly liberating us, right? What if Mexico decided that they're going to act like Israel and say, half this shit used to be Mexico. We're coming back to get it. We are the original Americans. California, Colorado, New Mexico, that's ours originally. God said that we need to go back and get our territory. We're going to take it back. If they did that, we'd think they were insane and we'd fight them. But per the Bibi logic, as long as they said God said they could do it, they can do it. That's the Bibi logic. The Bibi logic would be Mexico reclaiming 40% of the United States because it used to be Mexico. The UN is supposed to stand against these kinds of actions. But if you take it and flip the context, because we act as if there is something called American exceptionalism that says that we are so different from the rest of the world, that we and Israel are two isolated atoms in the body that don't have to act like the other atoms in the body. We get to do special different things. We get to bomb ships in the Caribbean. Okay. The U.S. is the biggest user of illegal narcotics on earth. If an American ship carrying cocaine were to roll out into the Caribbean, and Russia or China said, oh, we got to stop these drugs before they come across here and get into our part of the world, they bombed it, we'd be up in arms. But we're doing it. So American exceptionalism means we can literally do something that completely violates not just the laws of war, but the moral law. And just say, well, we got to make sure these drugs don't get all the way from 3,000 miles away up into Florida. But we're doing it. And we're using a logic that only applies to us. And we keep doing it. And we're doing it in the same places where doing it has ruined the world. The Eisenhower administration was laudatory in some ways. But the CIA, you go to Dulles Airport, them Dulles brothers were evil. One was Secretary of State, and one was the CIA director, the Dulles brothers. And they decided that they were going to remake the world the way it would work for us. And so they started overthrowing governments. 1953, they overthrew Mossadegh's government in Iran. And they said that that government, which the people had elected, which the people of Iran chose, they said, well, that's not good enough because Mossadegh, the elected leader of Iran, decided that the oil underneath Iran's soil belonged to BP, British Petroleum, and to the United States. We, the West, own that oil. And if he said, well, we are going to keep that oil for Iran, we just overthrew his government and put a Shah in there and said, now you got that guy. He stayed in there for 24 years. He killed people, he tortured people. He ruined Iran, which was a normal country and which would still be a normal country today. You could go probably to vacation in Iran if it had remained a normal country with Mossadegh there. They were a normal country. People, you can go back and find the old videos. People going to the movie theater. People weren't having to cover. There was no Islamic revolution. It was just a normal country. And then we said, yeah, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. My father's country got liberated, the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the 1960s. They said Belgium, which killed 10 million Congolese because they decided that the rubber and the gold and all the minerals of the Congo really belonged to Belgium. They killed minimum 10 million people. Someone said 20 million Congolese were killed or had their hands cut off if they wouldn't pick enough rubber. Finally, they get free and they elect a guy called Patrice Lumumba as their prime minister, and he's their George Washington. Then he makes the mistake of saying, all that oil, all the minerals, the Democratic Republic of Congo is Wakanda in terms of the number of minerals it has. It has the most mineral wealth on earth. It should be the richest country on the whole planet because of all the different minerals, gold, all sorts of other minerals. But Patrice Lumumba came along and said, guess what? All the minerals, those belong to the people of the Congo. And the CIA said, excuse me? Kill him off and put in a dictator, Mobutu Sese Seko, who stays for 42 years. But the U.S. would rather have a broken, destroyed Congo under a dictator named Mobutu, who we control, than having a free Congo that controls its own resources. We would rather have a broken, destabilized, terrified Iran where people had no rights and where people had no freedom, but that had a dictator that we control. We did it throughout Central America. You name the Central American country. We destabilized it. The CIA went in, overthrew governments that were perfectly legitimate, that had been legitimately elected, because we said whatever natural resources exist throughout Central and South America, those belong to us. And if you don't agree, we overthrow you and we put in a dictator. They elect Salvador Allende in Chile. He's doing good things. He's giving out socialized medicine. He's trying to make his country into what it was meant to be. We say, we don't like that. You get Pinochet. He then kills, we don't care. Haiti, it keeps trying to struggle up from having overthrown the French who were enslaving them. They throw out the French. They literally beat Napoleon Bonaparte, send him back to France. They get free, and the U.S. and France and the whole of Europe say, yeah, that's not good enough. Are you going to let us own all that crap that's underneath your soil? You're not? We have to overthrow that. And we're never going to let you be. We're never going to let you be successful. We're going to fine you. We're going to make you pay reparations to France. We're going to destroy you. And the only person we're going to let govern you is Jean-Claude Duvalier, who is a dictator, killing, murdering, hurting people, destroying the country, and sending all the money back over here to a handful of oligarchs. And then when he goes, we're like, now you get the baby, you get the young one, you get baby Doc Duvalier, Papa Doc and baby Doc. That's who we want. And then when they try to put their own guy in, we're saying, but what about this guy? He's like a priest. He's with the people. Literally, the Clinton administration goes and puts him on a plane and gets him the hell out. We overthrow that. They try to get free. They try to get, because they want to be free with their resources under their control. And we say, nah, you can't do that. And now here's Donald Trump again with the same colonial mindset, telling the Palestinians, you can't be free. Israel gets to own you because God said they could have it. And now we're going to, with God apparently, work with them to turn your shit into a real estate development for us, for Jared Kushner, for Witkoff, and for Donald Trump, and for Netanyahu. We get that because that's ours. Oh, and by the way, y'all know you sit next to a giant natural gas reserve, right? Just so happens. That's ours too, by the way. We at this point are the most dangerous country on earth and have been for 2 generations because we keep interfering. The British Empire perfected the art of interfering in foreign countries where they have no damn business, colonizing them and extracting until there's nothing left and it's bone dry and dead. And then we picked up the ball from our daddy, Great Britain, and have continued the process. Belgium did it. All of Europe did it. Spain did it. Portugal did it. What Europe has perfected is theft. Theft of humans, theft of resources, theft of governments, theft of freedom. And we keep saying that we are the standard. Marco Rubio, little Marquito, went to Europe and said that forever the United States will be a son of Europe. He said, this is a white man's country. This is a son of Europe. First of all, have you looked in the mirror, Marquito? Part of you is a son of Africa. But he said, this is a white man. This is a son of Europe. But what is Europe? Europe has a history of nothing but theft, colonization, and destruction. It's the Europeans running Israel that can't allow it to be the way it was when all sorts of people lived there. Jews, Christians, all kinds of people could live there. And not now. They're saying everybody but us got to go. Because God said this is ours. The same thing that white South Africans said when they arrived and saw the Kikuyu and said, ooh, you'd make good slaves. The same thing the Europeans said when they came here and saw the indigenous people here and say, ooh, you'd look good gone. Maybe we could take your scalps and hang them on the wall. Maybe we can take your land and turn it into our farms and into our plantations, but you got to go. These people all do the same thing. This colonizer, settler colonialism is what Europe invented. It is what Europe perfected. And yes, those in the chat that are saying, is Cuba next? Absolutely. Because the hegemon never gets full. They thirst and thirst and thirst, and they never get full. Their bellies are unfillable. Their greed is insatiable. They cannot be sated. Their thirst cannot be quenched. And Donald Trump is on some hegemonic helium. He's on some hegemonic crack cocaine right now. He's high as hell. And he said, I'm going to keep getting higher. That high, he can't get satisfied. He wants Greenland. He wants Panama Canal. He wants Canada. He wants Gaza. And he apparently wants Iran. He thinks he can colonize the earth. And then these people, not just him, but these oligarchs, these super rich, they've decided that they can share up the world, eat up all the resources, enslave all the people, take and take and take and divide it up among themselves, and then even use the children as playthings for their own sick pleasure. Record it and use it against each other. With AI, they've decided that the only thing we get, we, the people of the world, the ordinary people, what we get is surveillance, because they will surveil us in order to subjugate us so that they can divide the world amongst themselves, take what they want, subjugate anyone who resists, jail, imprison, or kill whoever says no, and surveil you so that you're too afraid to say no. What we just did in Iran is just one small piece of that hideous puzzle. The stealing and theft of freedom. And this is not to excuse the Iranian regime, which is horrible, horrific. But what I've always said is that when a people get good and sorry and they get good and sick of being oppressed, people have a tendency to overthrow their oppressive governments. When they get good and sick of it, the Haitians were enslaved. They had no weapons. They had no money. But when they got good and sick of Napoleon Bonaparte and them son of a bitches from France subjugating them and turning them into slaves, guess what they did? They picked up their little rocks, sticks, whatever they could find, and overthrew an army.
They found machetes.
They had machete. They said, we use this machete to cut sugar. We're going to use it to cut you. When they got good and sick of being oppressed, they overthrew Napoleon Bonaparte. When people get good and sick of it, if the Iraqis had wanted Saddam gone, there was nothing anyone could have done to make Saddam survive. But we decided to step in and said, we'll do it. But by the way, we now own your country. We rewrite your constitution. Oh, suddenly you've got a constitution that allows pure capitalism. We get to own all of the businesses in your country. We get to come in and own your oil. See, that's in your constitution now. We are pillaging. It's piracy. We pirated it. We didn't liberate Iraq. We pirated it and said, oh, all that social shit, we can let Iran handle that. You're Shiites like them, right? Go ahead and let Iran handle the religious part. We just want your money. And by the way, if you are MAGA right now, MAGA, if you hear me, you got played so bad. Because if you think that any of this is going to redound to your financial benefit, you may enjoy watching brown people get bombed, little girls in schools getting bombed because they're brown and they're Muslim. And so you think they're not human and they're not as good as you and you don't care. But if you think that at the end of the day, your pockets will be fuller, you are a fool. This president who wants a Nobel Peace Prize claiming he ended wars, he didn't end a single war. He's starting wars. He started World War III and you voted for him. Some of you 3 times. What is it that you thought he was going to do for you? If your children end up having to occupy Iran, that's on you. You sent your own children to destruction. This is extortion. This is theft. This is war without reason. Nobody voted for war with Iran. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene knows that. No one asked for this. And by the way, we don't work for Bibi Netanyahu. He should not be able to instruct and order around the president of the United States. He is the client state. We're supposed to be the boss, but it has been inverted. Somehow this man, after 30 years of cajoling, whining, lying, sending false information to president after president after president, he couldn't trick George Herbert Walker Bush. I don't know if he was in with George Herbert Walker Bush. He's in for a long time. I don't know if he was there, but he certainly couldn't trick Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton was in the Epstein files. Whatever they had on Clinton, it wasn't enough because he couldn't get Clinton to do it. He couldn't get George W. Bush to do it, and George W. Bush wasn't the smartest. Famously, George W. Bush wasn't the brightest character. And he did trick him into doing Iraq. They put all the fault. They even got Colin Powell to besmirch himself with the lies about Iraq getting nuclear weapons. Now, Iraq did have chemical weapons because we gave them to them. He couldn't get him to invade, to attack Iran. He couldn't do it. He couldn't even get Trump to do it the first time that he was president because there were normal people in the United States Pentagon who said, dude, that's a bad idea. And they were able to talk him down from whatever he might have wanted to do for Bibi Netanyahu the first time. Certainly couldn't get Biden to do it. And Biden is a Zionist. Biden is a Christian Zionist who looked the other way shamefully as Bibi Netanyahu committed genocide using our bombs and our money. He was able to get Joe Biden to agree to let him do a genocide. He was able to get the Biden-Harris administration to do it even at the cost of letting Trump back in, even at the cost of destroying the base of the Democratic Party such that it would not get off the couch and vote for Kamala Harris. They were willing to let her go down and let Trump back in just to let Bibi Netanyahu commit a genocide. In the interest of letting Bibi Netanyahu behave as flagrantly as lawlessly with the impunity that Trump uses today to be the Supreme Court to Bibi Netanyahu, to be as what the Supreme Court is to Trump, to be that to Netanyahu. They wouldn't let him do anything, but they didn't let him do this. And trust me, he wanted war with Iran. He wanted Obama to do it. He wanted Obama to do war with Iran. But Obama was like, hell to the no, I'm not doing war with Iran. He did Libya. He did that. He wasn't going to do this. All these presidents who they've tried to get to do this, they finally found their royal fool. They finally found their royal fool. But it's not as if what Trump has done in Iran is new for the United States. This used to be our business when our CIA used to go around the world throwing over governments that didn't obey us, that didn't fall on their knees and hand over their resources. This oligarchy, this global oligarchy has to be shut down. It has to be shut down. It is producing nothing but misery, death, and war. It is producing nothing but misery, death, and war. War on innocence, children who are going to school. That is the price of theft and of obedience, of Donald Trump's obedience to Bibi Netanyahu and the Likud right-wing government in Israel, which I will never stop reminding you is the sort of creature of and the descendants of the Irgun and the Stern gang. We did that on this show. Never forget, what we call Hamas, the U.S. government used to call the Irgun and Stern gang. If y'all didn't see that episode, Google it and look it up, but I'll give you the short version. In the 1920s and 1930s, European Jewish expats were people who had moved into Israel. And again, there were already Jewish people there. They were called Mizrahi. They were local. They come from North Africa. They were native to the region, just like the Palestinians were. But the new people came on over, and then decided they wanted to have unlimited immigration from Europe, from Russia, from the European nations, and they wanted it to be unlimited. But the local people said it should be limited. It shouldn't be unlimited. This is sort of shades of U.S. settler colonialism, where first a few Europeans came and the Native Americans said, ooh, that's interesting. And then more and more and more and more and more. And they said, this is too much. And then they said, well, we'll just kill the Indians. We'll call them Indians and kill them all because we want all this land. So sorry, Indians. But that happened there as well. And people wanted unlimited immigration. And they formed these two militant groups, the Irgun and the Stern gang. And the Irgun was the original one, which the U.S. designated as a terrorist group because they were blowing up buildings. They were committing terrorist acts. They were blowing up railroads. They killed a man named Lord Moyne, assassinated him. He was a British lord because remember, the British controlled this territory. It was called the Mandate of Palestine. How arrogant. The British decided they had a mandate to own and colonize Palestine. They said, we're in charge of Palestine. It's ours, right? This is a European thing. And they said, we get to limit who gets to come in, who gets to not come in. And this group, the Irgun, said, no, you don't get to limit that. We get to have unlimited immigration from Europe. We do what we want. 1930s, a group even more militant than them breaks off. A guy named, I believe Avram is his first name, Stern. He's even more militant. And he says the Irgun, which was a right-wing group, is not militant enough for me. They used to have a newsletter that said that Arabs were a class of slaves, that they should have no inherent rights. The indigenous people, the Arabs, they should have no rights. We should just kill them if we need it. We want the land. And this Stern gang was so extreme that literally, you can look it up right now if they haven't deleted it. You can go on the FBI. I looked it up. This government, you can just see it. They called them terrorists. And the British called them terrorists because they were killing Europeans. Those two groups, Irgun and Stern gang, the first two prime ministers of Israel when Israel declared independence, one was in the Irgun, had been arrested with the Irgun. The other one had been in the Stern gang. First two prime ministers were from the Irgun and the Stern gang. That would be like the leader of Hamas becoming the president of Palestine. But the U.S. looked the other way. People who they considered terrorists, they looked the other way and said, it's fine. The IDF came from those original militant groups. It sort of was born there and then it morphed into their IDF. So the history of every country is violence and also theft and colonialism. That is sort of the root of it all. And this idea that's never gone away is that when powerful people who have more powerful weapons want things and want land, they can have it because they have more powerful weapons, because they have more powerful friends. And in this case, this party, the Likud, which is what came from Irgun and Stern Gang, I can't remember which, it's either Irgun or Stern Gang, gave birth to the Likud party. So it is a far right party, but it isn't even the farthest right party in Israel. There are further right parties than the Likud, which is the very far right party. They're like MAGA. But there's a party that's even further right than them. Think of MAGA versus Nicolas Fuentes. Nicolas Fuentes, who's even further to the right. And those people are in a alliance with Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu has to keep them pleased in order to stay in power. If they come out of, they have a parliament. They don't have our system. They have a parliament. And so in order to be the prime minister, you have to have a majority in the parliament that votes for you to be prime minister. The way that Bibi Netanyahu stays in power and has been in power for more than 20 years is that he creates these coalition governments, and he has his right-wing Likud party partnered with these even further right, crazy, nutty right-wing parties that are made up of settlers. And they are people who believe in eliminating all the Palestinians from the land, taking it all, the way the U.S. kind of did with the indigenous people here. And in order to stay in power, he needs to keep those people happy. Although there's no evidence that he's a religious man, the way that Bibi Netanyahu keeps those people happy is he talks a lot of religion. He says things like, remember the Amalek. If you are a religious Christian, you know about the Amalekites, which God commanded, was it Joseph? He commanded one of the prophets to slaughter them. And don't just slaughter them, right? This is the mean God. Slaughter them and kill their animals, kill their livestock, kill their children, kill their women, kill them all. And he will say things like, remember the Amalek. And he's not even religious. My understanding growing up is that he was an atheist. But a lot of people who are Zionists are not religious. They're atheists. It's a political ideology, not a religious one. That's why there can be Christian Zionists and atheist Zionists. And it's not a religion. And it certainly isn't Judaism at all. It's just, it's a right-wing belief system. And so he, in order to keep those people happy, King Saul. Thank you, Jason. We have to get, you know what I mean? I'm a church girl, but I don't have it all memorized like a pastor. And so here's the thing. His coalition is very much aware that, like Donald Trump, Bibi Netanyahu is corrupt. He's financially corrupt because it's always about money. He and his wife are facing charges of corruption, which could send him to jail, to prison. Same kind of prisons they put Palestinians in for protesting or being journalists when they're not torturing them. And in order to stay out of prison, he needs to do things that keep him as a war president, such that the parliament and his coalition of right-wing Likud and even further right-wing parties, this guy Smotrich, you've heard of him? Nutter. To keep those people happy, the people who say we should put Palestinians on a diet, meaning take all their food away so they starve and die, he has to keep those people happy. And so he needs to stay in power. And what we heard Bill Clinton say, the clip we played earlier, is that the thing that keeps him in power is war. Because there's a lot of trauma among Israeli people, because a lot of people who live in Israel are the sons, grandsons, grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. And so they live in a state of constant sort of trauma, some of them, not everyone, but some. And to keep people living in trauma is a really great way to keep power. And so they keep people living in power by saying we need to be at war all the time. And the Arabs will all wipe us off the face of the earth. We can never stop fighting them. If we stop fighting them, they'll wipe us out. That sense of trauma is part of how Bibi Netanyahu stays in business. If you listen to him speak, that is what he does. He constantly triggers the trauma of the Israeli people such that they will never feel comfortable and calm. Same way MAGA and Trump and right-wingers and Project 2025 constantly try to trigger white Americans to feel constant trauma, to say, if you stop resting, if you stop working, if you rest for one moment, Black and brown people are not just going to take over. They're going to kill you. They're going to genocide you. They're going to eliminate you. You're going to go away. You're going to disappear. Nicolas Fuentes, these groypers claim that white Americans are going to vanish, that they're going to be wiped off the face of the earth if they don't do something urgent. It's why they freak out about abortion. If we don't force white women to start having kids, we're going to be what? Somehow they think a few immigrants are going to make them disappear, you know? And this trauma, this inducement of trauma, is how you keep power over people who aren't going to take the time to look it up and who will take it from you when you say, be traumatized. And Bibi Netanyahu has kept his people traumatized for more than 20 years to stay in power. And if a war isn't happening in that moment, he can't stay in power. Problem with the Gaza war, they've killed everybody. They've killed everyone. Everyone is dead. Gaza is cut in half, and these poor Palestinians are living in half of Manhattan. 2 million people scrunched into basically the size of half of Manhattan. They're all in refugee camps. There's no one left to fight. There's no one left to kill. You've destroyed all the schools, all the universities. You've mashed all the schools down. You've gotten rid of the people who even try to give food to them. You've killed people who tried to bring them food. You've so destroyed this place. That war, there's very little left for you to gain. In the West Bank, you're not supposed to be at war. You're just literally having the settlers just go in and knock people off, kill them, and take their land. So that's now of its own. They've done some sort of decrease, and we're just going to eat up the rest of the West Bank. You've kind of made that run its course. That genocide is running its course. He needs another war. And he's really wanted this war with Iran, as we've heard our experts say, for a really long time, because that would also give him something to put a notch in his belt, that he has now conquered the biggest threat to Israel's dominance in the region. And he wants to make sure that no country can ever be more dominant than Israel in the region. And Iran poses the threat of doing that. They have very great universities. They have scientists. They have, what have you got there? You got your video, Jason? You want to show? You want to play it? You want to play it now? Tell me what the video is. Oh. Well, hold on for just 1 second. But so what he is attempting to do right now, as Bill Clinton has said, as we heard Trita Parsi say, is that he's trying to keep the country in a state of war permanently. And a war with Iran would be a hell of a World War III that would keep him in power probably until he's dead. And if it goes on, it never ends, and it drags America in, better for that, even better for Bibi, even better. And what he needs in the United States is a royal fool who's willing to go along with it and put American troops at risk and the American people at risk in order to do that. And yes, Theodore Herzl is who started the Zionist movement. And again, was, to my knowledge, an atheist. And so when people try to take this and turn it about Jewish people, that to me is an insult to Jewish people. This isn't about Judaism. What Bibi Netanyahu is promoting isn't Judaism any more than what, Mike Huckabee is promoting is Christianity. It's Christian nationalism. It's a nationalist political philosophy. Okay, Jason, let's go ahead and play. This is a gentleman named Shlomo Kramer, who is he is a tech founder, and he's a tech leader who had a really crazy statement. He's an Israeli tech founder. His company works in the surveillance world. Just to set it up for a moment, he was interviewed, and I think this interview might have been a couple of years ago, about kind of what needs to be done in terms of the narratives, because what you've had is Americans who, the information I just told you, are waking up to some of those things and saying, wait a minute, I'm not so sure that we ought to support this little country that keeps making so many wars in the region that drag us in. And maybe the Palestinians that are getting slaughtered are the victims and not the villains. And the Gallup numbers have shown that it's now inverted. Most Americans, including a plurality of Republicans, even some MAGA, are like, wait a minute, I think the good guys or the bad guys are really the Israelis. And I think this idea of Zionism and settler colonialism and taking all this land and throwing these people out and kicking them out of the country might not be good, and might actually not really be even Judaism. And a lot of even Jewish people are like, this isn't right. And so now what you've had is kind of a panic response among Bibi Netanyahu. You saw the other day, he came out and said, well, we're going to wean ourselves off of U.S. aid. Oh, really now? So now you're saying you're not going to need the aid anymore. You're going to get off of that, right? Because American people don't want to give it. And now he's also said, I need our American allies and folks in the United States to flip the script and stop people turning against Israel and change the narrative so that we again are perceived as the good guys and the Palestinians are again perceived as the bad guys. That gives me Shlomo Kramer, and that's how that sets it up. He gave an interview, and I think this is from CNBC, where he says this is what needs to be done to fix the narrative.
Shlomo Kramer, also one of the founders of Checkpoint, another big cyber company. Shlomo, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
How is AI, cyber warfare, shaping geopolitics right now?
So AI is going to revolutionize cyber warfare, from critical infrastructure to the fabric of society and politics, and undermining it, giving unfair advantage to authoritarian governments against democratic countries, First Amendment type of...
That's already happening?
That's already happening. You're seeing the polarization in countries that allow for the First Amendment and protect it, which is great. And I know it's difficult to hear, but it's time to limit the First Amendment in order to protect it, and quickly before it's too late.
What do you mean?
I mean that we need to control the platforms, all the social platforms. We need to stack rank the authenticity of every person that expresses themselves online, and take control over what they are saying based on that ranking.
The government.
The government should
control the social media.
Yeah, should do that. And we need to educate people against lies, and government need to develop cyber defense programs that are as sophisticated as the cyber attack. Today it's a 1 to 100 ratio. And really, government are not doing this today at any rate, and enterprises are left fending from themselves.
The technology is moving much faster than the political system typically can to respond to
so
it.
You need to use technology in order to stabilize the political system, and you need to put adjustments that are perhaps not.
I mean, we're at a point, though,
necessary.
right? I mean, I can go on Instagram or TikTok, and frankly, it already is becoming unclear what is fake and what is real.
Exactly.
And once you eliminate that ability to discern truth from fiction, then what are you left with?
You're left with polarization of society and inner fighting, and you have to control that. And you see that already happening across the world. So this is an urgent need by the government to do that. And until then, enterprises are buying by themselves more and more cybersecurity solutions, but they can't afford all these solutions by themselves. So they are looking for ways to deliver a more efficient consumption.
And I assume you have some of those ways, obviously.
Right. So, and that drives really the next generation of companies such as Wiz, CrowdStrike, Cato networks on the network, that are platforms and are able to deliver this extended need for security in an affordable way for enterprises.
For enterprises,
Yeah.
not for governments.
Not for government, but government need to start building their programs, and the same tools can be used also by government.
But the two...
Control the platforms. Control the platforms. And by the way, Cato is his company. So what he's saying, to kind of wheel it back, and we will allow for maybe some errors in translation. English may not be his English language, but it sounds to me like he was saying that governments, and even as the two hosts are trying to kind of push back and say, well, you don't mean government. And he's like, no, I mean the government needs to control the platforms, control the messaging. He goes on to praise China for completely controlling the platforms online and in social media, so that they have a single narrative coming out on their social media that is not facing challenging narratives that come from the bottom up. He's saying there needs to be top-down control of the system. Well, what are we getting in the United States right now? There's a company called Anthropic that has been cut off from its government contract because they would not agree to allow the Pentagon to use their technology, which is AI technology, to surveil and potentially kill people using their technology at the government's discretion. That there would be no limit in the government's demand. Pete Hegseth has demanded that they give no limits to the use of their AI technology, even if that meant using it to kill people. And Anthropic, which tries to be, they call themselves the good AI company, they said you can't do that. And so they said they gave them till Friday to play ball with the government, or they will be cut off. And they cut them off because Anthropic said no. Meanwhile, one family, a very hyper pro-Israeli family that is personally friendly with Bibi Netanyahu and hyper Zionist, the Ellisons, who also believe in mass surveillance. David Ellison has bragged about the fact that we will have mass surveillance in the country. They're about to control HBO, Warner, CNN, TikTok, and CBS. because they've now driven Netflix off the field, and they will now gobble up and eat up Warner Brothers in addition to Paramount. And they will now control 2 of the major sources of news in the United States and will be able to shape them accordingly to say the narratives they want, narratives that will be favorable toward the country they prefer and unfavorable toward those who oppose that country. Meanwhile, Jason, if you could please grab a 7, if you could. Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, a city that has a lot of Iranian Americans, he released a statement talking about the strike. And I'm going to read it to you. Today's military strikes on Iran carried out by the United States and Israel mark a catastrophic escalation in an illegal war of aggression, bombing cities, killing civilians, opening a new theater of war. Americans do not want this. They do not want another war in pursuit of regime change. They want relief from the affordability crisis. They want peace. I am focused on making sure that every New Yorker is safe. I have been in contact with our police commissioner and emergency management officials. We are taking proactive steps, including increasing coordination across agencies and enhancing patrols of sensitive locations out of an abundance of caution. Additionally, I want to speak directly to Iranian New Yorkers. You are part of the fabric of this city. You are our neighbors, small business owners, students, artists, workers, and community leaders. You will be safe here. That is the kind of statement we would expect an American mayor to issue in a city that's got a large Iranian community. But let's go to A8, if you could. That statement apparently annoyed CBS News. Because a gentleman named Masih Alinejad, who was targeted for assassination by the Iranian regime at her Brooklyn home. This is one of the actors I told you, Iranian regime is not a nice regime. She had been targeted previously. She responded to Mr. Mamdani's statement saying, Mr. Mamdani, you are more than welcome to come to one of my safe houses. She apparently clearly opposes the Iranian regime, as any Iranian person might do. But look who retweeted that with a fire emoji. Bari Weiss, who runs CBS News, who runs a supposed news organization. Bari Weiss, a very clearly identified, and I think she would brag about being a self-identified Zionist, very pro-Israel, whose Substack, which made her famous and which was purchased for like what, $150 million by the Ellisons, David Ellison, to then draw her into and Paramount so that she could then run CBS News. She retweets that comment that CBS News reported on with a fire emoji. She's not even pretending to be either a journalist or the true leader of a news organization. At this point, she has decided to be a troll. That is who is running the Tiffany Network, where Walter Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow used to work. Anybody who's wondering why Anderson Cooper left, I don't know him personally, but I think I can guess why all of these storied, respected journalists are leaving that network. And now the Bari Weiss style is likely coming to CNN. And CNN is not perfect. CNN in many ways does the both sides thing. They sort of try to play it down the middle, even in fascism. But CNN might be the only network in the US that has done extensive on-the-ground coverage of the Palestinians who are being dispossessed, particularly in the West Bank, and who've tried to do it in Gaza. They have Christiane Amanpour. They have resources. They've tried to at least tell the story of what the Palestinian people are going through. I suspect that will end once the Ellisons are in control. If you are a person that has TikTok, which is where much of the information, the firsthand information of what Palestinians were dealing with in Gaza came from, if you have believed that that has been an important source of information, even also history information, lots of people who've taken up the idea of history and of telling the truth about the truth about the United States. They've done that through TikTok. TikTok has been very beneficial. It's kind of what Twitter used to be. I wouldn't suspect that to continue. And remember, when TikTok was made illegal, it wasn't because only the company was considered illegal. And a bunch of Democrats voted for that, unfortunately. It was because the algorithm being owned by China was considered a national security threat. Well, now the algorithm, the thing that gets you addicted to TikTok, is now owned by Larry Ellison, a man who believes in mass surveillance and who also believes that there is only one side in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it ain't the Palestinians, who does not believe there's a genocide. We are going to soon be living in a world of oligarchic, authoritarian propaganda from which your only escape will be new media. This is not a commercial for new media. It's just a fact. The reality is we have reached the point where America has tipped over the scale out of democracy. We have tipped over the scale out of normal democracy. We have tipped into a very dangerous place. And you have a president of the United States that believes that he has the right to unilaterally declare war on ships in the Caribbean, to kidnap the leader of Venezuela, to kill the religious leader of Iran, to topple 2 governments in 2 months, to threaten to do the same to Cuba, to threaten to do the same to the sovereign Denmark territory of Greenland, to threaten to do the same to Canada. He believes he has the right to take whatever countries he wants, likely for his own personal financial benefit, and to protect the fellow oligarchs, the super rich, pedophiles who have traded children, girls and apparently boys and girls, like playing cards, to use them for their lurid, sick, disgusting pleasure, to trade them around the world like they are nothing, like they aren't even human, like they have no rights and that they have no humanity. These people are so bored, they're so rich, they're so entitled that they even feel entitled to abuse children and then to laugh about it together in sick, disgusting emails. This is what you get when you create a global oligarchy, when you create a global plutocracy. These people want to control the media. They want to control social media. They want to surveil you at home in your car. Just learned today, there's an Israeli firm that has created technology that will allow them to surveil you in your car. They want to surveil you in your phone. They want to control what you tweet, what you post, what you say on social media. They want to control when you protest, if you protest, how you protest. They want to arrest you for protesting. They want to control whether or not you are a citizen. They want to let the president of the United States declare you not to be a citizen if he doesn't want you, throw you in a van, or throw you on a plane and ship you to whatever country they want that will be paid to take you and throw you in their prisons. This is not freedom. This is global autocracy, global autocracy. And they want to distract us with stupid entertainments so that we will get used to it, and they want to make us too afraid to say no. They want to make us so scared that we simply go along with it. And then at election time, they want to make you so terrorized and terrified that you won't even vote it out. That you won't even take the one last opportunity that you have to save yourself from this hell. If you think this gets better, you haven't read Project 2025. This doesn't get better. They want to control women's fertility. They want to make you have children when they tell you. They want to make you marry when they tell you. They want to relieve the laws against child marriage, and they've done that in some states. They want to make trans people disappear. They say they don't exist. They will take your driver's license. They will force you to go into the bathroom they tell you to. They will force you to tell you when to urinate, where to urinate, where you can walk, where you can live. They can segregate you. They want to remove Black people from public light, say you can't be heroes, you can't be depicted. They will erase your existence from ever being a part of the American experiment. They'll say you never did anything heroic. You were never a war hero. You did absolutely nothing. Only the people they depict are heroes, even if some of those people are criminals who abuse children. They said you will fall on your knees and worship them. This isn't freedom. And I'm not just talking to the people on my side. If you are a MAGA and you think this is freedom, I don't know how to help you. I don't know what you're smoking. If you think you're going to escape from this nightmare unabused, read a book. Read about what happens when authoritarians come. They come for everybody. They will eventually come for you too. They'll never let you be free either, and you'll never be able to afford your life. They don't want you to have anything. They want everyone to be poor, scared, and obedient. Just as obedient as Donald Trump is to Bibi Netanyahu. Because baby, he's obedient. The one person Donald Trump has ever obeyed, and I did a Trump book, so I know he's not an obedient man, but he's obedient now. I don't know what Bibi Netanyahu has on him. I don't know what Epstein had on him. I don't know what's in those Epstein files, but baby, it must be bad. Because Donald Trump is obedient. But to only two countries, Russia and Israel. Obedient. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. We're in a crisis. America, you in trouble, girl. And if the blowback from what we've done to Iran starts to redound and to resonate in our communities, all I can say is, if you voted for Trump, this is what you voted for. Don't say this is not what you voted for. This is what you voted for. You voted for this sickness, this pain. You voted to let these pedophiles walk and get away with their crimes. This is what you voted for. You voted to let the guy who apparently couldn't tell when he was an assistant coach that the coach was abusing the male wrestlers for a long time, or not the coach, sorry, the physician that was in charge of dealing with the Ohio State University men's wrestling team, was abusing those guys. And apparently he and Les Wexner, they couldn't tell. They apparently didn't know. And Jim Jordan, who looked the other way, and apparently he claims he didn't have any idea. That's what he says. I don't know. I wasn't there. He claims he had no idea. Just like Trump had no idea that Jeffrey Epstein was abusing children. No idea. Jim Jordan is now in charge of the Judiciary Committee in the House. Well. And the Democrats, don't let them off the hook either. Because the organization that says that we're not allowed to question any of this, that a foreign leader has talked our president into committing an act of war against Iran, that same foreign leader who's been trying to talk our presidents since Clinton, through Obama, through W, through Trump 1 and Biden, into invading Iran and going to war with Iran, that guy has talked our president into doing something so stupid that no general who wants to keep his stripes would ever advise it. There's an organization that says you're not even allowed to ask any questions about that. And if you're an elected official and you try to question it, and you try to question Bibi Netanyahu, they will spend unlimited amounts of money to destroy you, take you out of your job. AIPAC. And the Democrats are just as beholden and coddling of and bending the knee to AIPAC as the Republicans. They are just as bad as Mike Huckabee in that regard. They too have decided that this foreign country and its friends in the United States who formed a political action committee get to make them be obedient. And no one is explaining to us why that is. And I, for one, now that I'm no longer in corporate media, I feel free to ask, why is that? And I'm not saying I know why, because I don't. I genuinely don't know why the president of the United States is obedient to a foreign leader whose bills we pay. That would be like if you're financially supporting a friend and then they tell you what to do. We're financially supporting a country that then orders us to go to war with a country that didn't do anything to us, and we do it. I would like to know why. I, for one, would like our representatives in Congress to ask why. Why is it that the president of the United States, who obeys no laws, who recognizes no authority, who doesn't even recognize the authority of Congress, which is the Article 1 power when he's Article 2, who feels free to violate the law, to take bribes, to potentially sell pardons, to enrich himself from the presidency, to take in crypto wealth, which should be absolutely illegal, to violate every norm of the presidency. All the other 46 presidents that are dead are rolling in their graves, and the living ones are rolling their eyes. He's willing to do all of that. He says that he will not listen to the Supreme Court. He will not abide by any rule, any law. He will do anything he wants. But this one guy bosses him around, and he does it? Why? I just want to know why. I would like to know why Russia and Israel are the only two countries that seem to be able to make Donald Trump heel, to bring him to heel, to make him obey. I would like to know why. Why does he obey? Why did he obey and bomb Iran? And also, what are the implications for us? Because we have to pay the price. He's not going to pay the price. Donald Trump shirked on his military duties during Vietnam. He was too chicken shit to join the military then. His sons aren't going to join. His family aren't going to pay the price. We are. The rest of us, whether you're a military family or not, we're going to pay the price for this. We're going to pay whatever price there is to pay. We're going to pay it. And I, for one, would like our representatives to at least diligently attempt to find out why that is and what those prices will be. And how we can hold this person, how can we get him to obey? The only three people that seem to be able to get Donald Trump to obey are Bibi Netanyahu, Vladimir Putin, and Zoran Mamdani. Zoran seemed to also be able to get him to obey. They picked up a young woman, ICE tricked her way onto the Columbia University campus and took a young woman hostage who was an immigrant. And Zoran Mamdani called Trump and they let her go. That's the only other person that seems to be able to make Donald Trump obey.
You mean he asked him in his presence? He was there.
Yeah. He said he called him up and he said, "I need you to let this. What's up with this lady?" And he was like, "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry, Daddy. Let me go ahead and let her go." He said, "Oh, Daddy, I'm sorry." He let her go. I would love to know how he figured it out. Somehow he has Zen mastered Trump. Brilliant. Thank you for everybody who's supporting. The $49.99 is much appreciated. The tips are much appreciated. Thank you all. I appreciate that very much. South Florida Dungeon Mental 305. Wow, that's quite a name. And I get it. I understand. And also, I would like to know what it is that is in the Epstein files that has gotten Trump so shook that he freaks out every time he's asked about it. I would like to know. I certainly have an idea of what is in the head of Bibi Netanyahu. I've been paying attention to him since he was a commentator on Nightline back in the 80s. And he is drunk with power. He believes in being in power. And he believes certainly in destroying the Oslo process. You know, there's video of him bragging about how he destroyed the Oslo process, which was during the Clinton administration attempting to find peace and do a two-state solution. He has said very clearly there will never be a two-state solution under his watch, nor will there be a one-state solution. A two-state solution meaning a free Palestine. He says that's never going to happen, that as long as he lives and as long as he's in power, he will never let that happen. He's promised that to the far right in his country, and he's keeping his promise. They're eating up Palestinian territory day by day by day by day. He also wants to ensure that Iran never becomes a power equal to Israel. He's made that very clear, and he wants the United States' help to make that happen because he certainly can't defeat Iran on their own, Israel. So they decided we should do it. And even if they could defeat them, they have nukes. I mean, they theoretically could, but they're like, no, I'll make America do it. And we know why that is. He wants to stay in power for the rest of his life. He wants to be the prime minister for life, and he certainly is doing that. And he's succeeding. He also wants to not go to prison, which he should go to prison because he's alleged to be a corrupt man who is charged with corruption, he and his wife. And he would like to have that not happen. And he would like to not go to prison and not ever be tried. And he won't be as long as this is happening. He also would probably like there not to be too many questions asked about how a year before October 7th, the exact same plan was leaked to his military. And somehow it still happened anywhere a year later, almost exactly to the letter of the way it was in the plans that were leaked. And that 3 women in the IDF said, hey, you know, they're about to climb over this wall and come and kidnap some people. And they would, pshaw, we don't believe you, silly women. And then a year later, they did exactly that. So it's weird that he seemed to know, right? That he seemed to have like a heads up, like a years-long heads up on October 7th. And then it happened. And then he benefited from it and was able to take over Gaza, which is something he really wanted to do anyway. Just weird. Maybe coincidental. I don't know. Some of this could just be coincidental. And that the same, you know, coincidental like all the oligarchs who now want to surveil us all apparently being cool with Jeffrey Epstein before he died. Maybe just all coincidental that he was calling up Peter Thiel and inviting him to the island and calling up Elon and you know, kikiing with what's his name from Microsoft, Bill Gates. That he just seemed to know all the tech bros and he just seemed to know and be investing in all their shit. That he just seemed to be chilling with Palantir and know a lot about it. And then just weirdly enough, all the surveillance people and he seemed to be running in the same circles. Just like Donald Trump, maybe coincidentally, just knew all the pedophiles who had modeling agencies. And he just didn't know they were all raping the women and children. Maybe he just didn't know. Look at the woot. I love that. 1999. Thank you, Ralph. Ralph Barrett, 1932. Appreciate that. Not only 1999, but also a woot and a dancing emoji man. Shaking it for me. I love it. Super sticker. I like it. Maybe these are all coincidences. Maybe the oligarch class that seem to be using and abusing women and children, that seem to be trading them like playing cards. Maybe it's just coincidental that they also want to have a giant national, international surveillance state, a one world state, as the right used to claim that the left wanted, a one world state wherein the super rich get to just guap money and have unlimited funds and become trillionaires while the rest of us become drones and lose our jobs to AI and become cattle. Weird. Cattle, like chattel slavery, you mean? You mean they kind of want that system back, which was the original capitalism? Weird, right? Maybe all just coincidental that we are recreating the chattel slavery system, but on a global scale and with global hegemony by AI tech bros instead of planters. Probably just a coincidence. Another super sticker. Thank you, Yvonne. 1999. Appreciate it. It could be a coincidence. Like I always say that I could be wrong. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Thank you, Dolly. 1999. And a You Are Amazing with a dance. Another super sticker. We appreciate it. I could be wrong, and it could all just be simply coincidental that it appears that our global elites are depraved, want to surveil us, want wars, and want the rest of us to essentially be cows. I mean, it could be that I'm wrong and that I'm just paranoid and that maybe I just think that that's what I'm seeing, and that's not what I'm seeing. But I don't think I'm wrong. I actually don't think I'm wrong, because it seems to me that the evidence in front of my face is that the elites in this country and around the world are taking and snatching our liberties piece by piece by piece, and then they are starting wars for no reason. Look at Congo, going back to my father's country. Why are they at war all the time? Can someone explain it? Oh, that's right, because they have all the minerals and people want the minerals. Thank you, Make It Blaine NYC. 1999, appreciate it. They have all these minerals, right? And so for some reason, they just can't be at peace for whatever weird reason. Maybe coincidental. Maybe it's just weird that Israel is trying to cut Somalia in half and turn half of it into Somaliland, which they'll control, and that we simultaneously are seeing this regime attack Somali citizens and immigrants here. Maybe it's just coincidental that we have all this attack on Somalis all at the same time, that we're trying to bisect Somalia so Israel can have half of it under their control. Perhaps coincidental, as China is rolling across the entire world and Africa and making deals with all these African nations that are signing up agreements and trade agreements with them, that suddenly we have this weird Western interest in recolonizing pieces of that continent. It could be weird. It could be strange that we're seeing the agricultural infrastructure of the country disrupted by mass detention, but not really mass deportation. And these private prison companies that pay Trump are suddenly going to have a giant cohort of incarcerated potential 13th Amendment asterisk slave labor. Maybe just coincidental. That these oligarchs want to build AI factories in all of these impoverished white and Black communities, that they want to stick these AI factories everywhere where they will pollute the air and water, cause people not to be able to breathe, but that will further enhance their AI capabilities that will then be used on surveillance. So we'll pay with our lungs and with our electric bills to have them be able to surveil us and also make us stupider with AI, since we can't even look things up anymore because everybody just uses ChatGPT and Grok. Have you seen the thing on Twitter where people will see a known, very easily discernible fact and say, Grok, is this true? That's what we're becoming. Thank you, Brenda Miller. So this is where we are. The U.S., to reset for those of you who joined late, thank you to everybody who's jumped into this live. We really appreciate you guys spending some of your Saturday evening with us. The United States has committed an act of war against the sovereign nation of Iran, which again is not a good guy country. It's not a country that we would defend its government, but the way its government is our fault. We've attacked a country that we created. We created the current Iran by throwing out their democratically elected government in 1953. Mr. Mossadegh, who was the democratically elected, small d, democratically elected president of Iran, decided that the oil underneath the soil of Iran belonged to the United States, not to British Petroleum. And therefore, we threw him out, stuck in a Shah, which is a king who is just a fancy word for a king of Iran, who exploited and destroyed the country, brutalized people, treated them like garbage, and also enriched himself and his own family, wore a golden crown that would make Trump envious. And finally, young students and religious people overthrew him in 1979 in the very revolution that first made me interested in the news, and replaced him with a religious dictatorship whose name was Ayatollah Khomeini. And Ayatollah Khomeini ruled brutally Iran, but in their mind was a reformist. Originally, he was supposed to be a reformist, like how Trump was supposed to drain the swamp. He was supposed to drain the swamp. He ruled the country in effectively a religious dictatorship, something like Project 2025 wants to create for us, until 1989, when he up and died of old age. And when he died, another Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, came through. That Ayatollah Khomeini is who the Trump regime claims they have killed. Thank you, Queen NSY65 for the $20. The U.S. is now claiming that they have killed this second Ayatollah, Khomeini, who was also a brutal dictator, who made it his business to claim to be a reformist somewhat, to have a somewhat reformist government, but they continue to really crack down on protesters and women. So this is not a friendly regime, but again, it is the regime created by our meddling. If we had not messed with them, wouldn't have happened. But now we have what we have, and now the U.S. has decided they want to mess again with Iran because Israel told us to. And so the U.S. and Israel have bombed Iran, the most sadistic strike that we've heard of thus far. I'm sure there's more destruction, has been against a girls' school in which, to our count that we know of at this moment, 85, probably 85 children have died because it was at a school. It was a girls' school. And so this is unfolding as the Iranians deny that their leader is dead, but the U.S. insists that their leader is, in fact, deceased. Reuters is reporting that Trump says Khomeini is dead. They're not confirming it. Trump has continued to say it. I have one more thing, Jason, that I really have to play for everyone, because I think it speaks to the unseriousness of the regime that's running us, because we have a regime too. This is A9, Jason, whenever you get a chance. And you can put it up and maybe we'll check on the sound whenever you get it. Just let me know. Okay, here it is. Here's Donald Trump. As the U.S. was dropping bombs on Iran, apparently Donald Trump made a surprise appearance at a party in South Florida.
Put your hands up.
So, yeah, so Trump, this is now going viral, including among MAGA people who are pretty mad about it, that Trump made a surprise appearance to a party at Mar-a-Lago. And this, there's a photo of him in his supposed Mar-a-Lago. He's created his own version of the Situation Room, where he, is trying to circulate these very sober, serious-looking pictures of him and Marco Rubio and the rest of them watching, and sort of watching as the bombs go off. But this is the video that's circulating. Donald Trump taking the time in his tacky ballroom to party. Let me read this story here. While announcing a full-scale military strike against Iran and warning the American people that soldiers could die in the conflict, President Donald Trump made time to stop by a black tie gala at his own Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, Florida. The upscale event was hosted by Place of Hope, a faith-based nonprofit focused on child welfare in South Florida. Trump showed up in the same white USA trucker hat he wore in the social media video where he broke the news that America had entered its first full-scale war since 2003. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war, Donald Trump said in the clip. Hours later, guests at his club were photographed bidding in charity auctions and watching live performances while bombs were reportedly falling in Iran. Just so you understand who's leading you. Donald Trump wearing the exact same outfit and trucker hat that he wore in his supposedly super serious pictures in the Mar-a-Lago Situation Room as they dropped the bombs, took the time to stop by a party at Mar-a-Lago for a children's charity, which I wouldn't give to if I were you, because you don't know what that money, I mean, we don't know. I don't know about the charity. I won't say anything to besmirch it. It might be a lovely charity. I don't know. But he stopped by to party with his friends while children were being bombed in a school. This is a children's charity in South Florida while children were being bombed in a school in Iran because Bibi Netanyahu told Trump to, and he did it. And for him to say the lives of Americans, brave Americans, could be lost. Well, you know what, Trump? To reiterate what I said at the People's State of the Union, but to say literally what Robert De Niro said about you, fuck Trump. You were too scared and chicken shit to serve your country during the Vietnam War. You said you had bone spurs. You claimed to have bone spurs and were unable to serve. You shouldn't be sending anyone to war. You should be embarrassed. Go ahead, Jason.
They're going to put boots on the ground for real?
He said lives of Americans may be lost.
That's what I'm assuming. That's why I'm asking. I'm just trying to get clarification because this ain't going to be easy.
I don't know what else that could mean. But either way, there's video of some soldiers in Bahrain who are crapping as they watch bombs dropping outside their window. So if you're a U.S. troop that is deployed overseas, you're in immediate danger because Iran, as we heard from Nayyera, is not just bombing nearby. They're bombing anywhere that there are U.S. military bases. And you'll recall that Reagan got us in this kind of trouble when U.S. soldiers in Beirut, 120 were killed in bombings in Beirut. And Reagan promptly removed those soldiers from there because the blowback on us first hits our troops. Thank you, Phoebe Smith. We appreciate the $10. Thank you very much. Thank you, Denise, for the $19.99. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. We appreciate you. Is that $50? Wow. Or is that $30? $30. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. It's 50. Ooh, thank you. That's the 5 looks like the font. But the reality is our blowback hits our troops first. And presidents, when you send the American troops to war, you better have a really damn good reason. Because the kind of people who sign up for the United States military tend to be working class people. They're disproportionately people of color. Black Americans serve very disproportionately, at least up until they're getting all kicked out of the military. And people who are working class or poor serve disproportionately. Immigrants serve disproportionately. Somebody said, send Barron. Yeah, I agree. And there was a time when the Eisenhowers of the world, when presidents felt that they wouldn't start a war unless their own children enlisted. The Kennedys, Kennedy had the Cuban Missile Crisis, but Kennedy served. Kennedy was a World War II veteran. He served honorably and bravely and gallantly in the war. And so if he had sent troops to war, he would have done it as a warrior himself. We now have Donald Trump, Mr. Bone Spurs, and freaking Pete Hegseth, who's like a weekend warrior. I think he was in the National Guard. God bless the National Guard. Absolutely nothing wrong with the National Guard. But the thing he claims to have been proud of is that he was there the day that there was the skirmish in DC when Trump held the Bible upside down and that it was super dangerous for Donald Trump. That's what he brags about. Donald Trump shouldn't be sending anyone to war. He was too cowardly to serve in war himself, and he was old enough. And he was too much of a coward to do that. He's a physical coward. And yet, he's very proudly potentially putting our troops in danger, admitting that, and then going to a party at Mar-a-Lago. How shameful is that? At least have the decency to pretend to take it seriously what you've done. When President Obama announced that Osama bin Laden had been killed, and you will recall that this happened prior to, but we didn't get the information about it until after the White House Correspondents Association dinner, wherein he roasted Donald Trump. This is in 2011. Remember that?
It was happening during the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
No, but the actual operation took place before, because he was sitting in the Situation Room when it happened. So he was there in the Situation Room, but they didn't announce it right away. So he sat in the Situation Room. You see in the pictures, you see Hillary Clinton, you see the secretary, you see all of the secretaries around him. He was in the White House Situation Room. Then he went over after it was done and over. Then he attended the White House. He's such a cool dude that he went over to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, did jokes, got Trump pissed off. And then the next day he walked out and made the announcement that it happened. Here's the difference. President Obama didn't send U.S. troops into Pakistan to get Osama bin Laden. He sent SEAL Team 6. He sent a small cache of highly expert troops to go in and do a surgical operation, and that was that. These people just dropped bombs on a school. The blowback to that is going to hit every single overseas deployed person. When Barack Obama did that, he took it seriously. Even George W. Bush, as much as I am not a fan, I quit media, I quit the journalism business because I was so angry about the war in Iraq. I had no respect for that war or for George W. Bush sending our troops into a war for no reason. You know, Afghanistan, you could at least say, well, they're trying to hit back Osama bin Laden because they thought he was in Afghanistan when he was really in Pakistan. But even that war I opposed. Honestly, I'm very anti-war. But when they took people's trauma, again, I talked earlier in this live about the way that Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump both triggered trauma and then used trauma to manipulate their populations, particularly Bibi. George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and the neocons used our trauma from 9/11 to manipulate the United States into supporting a ground war in Iraq that had no basis and no connection to 9/11. Thank you, RKM2931. Wow, $50. Thank you. No basis. There was no reason for us to go to war with Iraq. Iraq had done absolutely nothing. But at the time, the neoconservatives had this grand plan to have a three-front war, North Korea, Iraq, and Iran. And they needed a justification because they also wanted to take control of Iraq's oil, the vast oil reserves in Iraq. And they needed a reason to do it. And they used 9/11 and manipulated the American people. 70% of Americans supported going to war in Iraq. I was among the 30% who did not, because I could see no connection. First of all, it's just, I've never been to the Middle East, but just a basic reading of history would tell you that Al-Qaeda would never be allied with Saddam Hussein, who they'd consider an apostate. Why would they ally with somebody they would consider an apostate? That didn't make sense to me as somebody who's just sort of done a basic rudimentary study of religion. It didn't make sense. These people would have probably chopped his head off had they gotten a hold of him. And so I'm like, but yet they're supposedly allies, Al-Qaeda, super religious, people who are twisting a religion to their own benefit are going to go to like an apostate and that didn't even make sense. But what they did is they twisted people's Islamophobia, people's willingness to believe anything bad about Arabs and Muslims, and used that to turn the war, not against the country that supplied 15 of the 19 hijackers, Saudi Arabia, which was friends with the Bushes and friends with the U.S., and that put 15 of those people on those planes. No, not Saudi Arabia. We get our oil from them. Let's turn that over and take that anger and direct it at Iraq. Then we get their oil. We get to rewrite their constitution, which we did, and we get to turn them into an experiment in capitalism. I thought that was disgusting and sick. Iran, Jason's just giving me the breaking news that Iran has officially confirmed Ayatollah Khamenei's death. This manipulation, this is a sickness. And now what do we do with a country whose leader we've deposed? Who gets to choose their leader? Do we get to choose it or do they? Is Marco Rubio going to dictate? And I will note, by the way, you know which country has more oil reserves than Iran and Iraq and has the most proven oil reserves on earth? I'll give the chat 10 seconds to guess. Both the chats. If you said Venezuela, ding, ding, ding. So if you're curious as to why we do everything we do, it's all about the Benjamins, baby. It's all about controlling resources. Venezuela has the most proven oil reserves on earth. You know who else has a lot of oil reserves? Somalia. Somalia. Every country we seem to have beef with. Nigeria. Remember, we suddenly were like, we care about Christians in Nigeria. And Nicki Minaj is like, yeah. Nigeria's got a lot of oil, too. They're in that top 20. Every country, oil is a curse. You know, when my mother's country, when Guyana discovered oil off the shore, I said, damn it, that's bad. That's a curse. It's a curse. You got oil under your soil, you get the eye of Sauron, meaning the United States starts looking at you funny and saying, how do we make that ours? That's ours, right? That's our oil, right? We just look at that and we say, ooh, that's ours. You're in trouble. So now if we have the confirmation that Khamenei is dead and the Iranians are now confirming it, we really do need to think about what happens next. What is the outcome that we should expect from that? What happens to our interests, U.S. interests? What happens to that country? What happens to our military troops who are serving overseas? Explosions across the Middle East. I'm reading a headline now that we're seeing now explosions heard across the Middle East as the Iranian Air Force begins to strike back. Explosions were heard across the Middle East on Saturday. This is CNBC's reporting after the U.S. and Israel launched a broad and joint operation in Iran, according to the Israel Defense Forces. And I'm always very dubious about anything that they report. Iran retaliated with strikes in Israeli and U.S. bases across the Gulf, Bahrain, Kuwait. Remember where we started a war in Kuwait because we also were like, you can't take our oil. That's our oil. That's George Herbert Walker Bush, the former CIA director, who did that one. But apparently you've heard explosions there. Qatar, which of course is the friend of Trump that gave them a plane. Remember when they were the bad guy? Donald Trump declared them to be a terrorist organization during his first administration and said that they support terrorism. That's where Al Jazeera is based. And suddenly he changed his mind when they gave him a plane. Jordan, which is our other ally, they probably get the second most amount of military aid after, I think it's third after Egypt. We give Israel the most, and then I think Egypt and Jordan. And the United Arab Emirates, each home to a U.S. base, all confirmed that they had intercepted missiles from Iran. In the UAE, the Ministry of Defense announced that the country was subjected today to a blatant attack by Iranian ballistic missiles, which was dealt with by UAE air defenses with high efficiency, and a number of missiles were successfully intercepted. So this is it. Welcome to World War III. And hopefully it will be contained and it will not metastasize across the world, and then it will effectively remain in the region. But even if it does, that does not mean that U.S. boots will not end up on the ground. There's no guarantee that American troops will not get sucked into this. Here's some news from the Times of Israel, which can give you some good information sometimes. Haaretz is my favorite Israeli paper, and I usually read them. What they're saying here is that the Iranian state media has confirmed that Khamenei was killed by U.S. airstrikes. Saudi leader, they're claiming, lobbied Trump to strike Iran despite outwardly favoring diplomacy. This is a report from the Times of Israel, claiming that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman made multiple private phone calls to Trump over the past month advocating a U.S. attack, despite his public support for a diplomatic solution. This is according to reporting from the Washington Post, citing 4 unnamed sources familiar with the matter. Why would Saudi Arabia favor an attack on Iran? Remember, we talked about it earlier when Trita Parsi was on. There are 3 poles of power. You could say 4 if you add Egypt, but Egypt has not really asserted itself the way it used to back in the old Nasser days. But the 3 kind of real principal sort of poles of power, if you say 4, if you say Egypt, would be Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. And they sort of struggle amongst themselves to be the big dog in the region. Israel is an expansionist power that's trying to physically grow its territory so that it has as much territory as possible with as few Palestinians on it as possible, because they know they get unlimited support. Used to be from all of the West, from England and Germany and from Europe, and also from the United States, but now mainly from the United States. They have unlimited access to military power. They have nuclear weapons. And so they are militarily the big dog in the region. But both Saudi Arabia and Iran have in the past expressed an interest in also getting nukes in order to balance their power, so that there's a balance of power between the Israeli state and the Iranians and the Saudis. And if the Iranians want nukes, the Saudis are always going to want nukes, because like the Israelis, the Saudis fear the Iranians. And there's this power play between these three powers. And again, I will throw Egypt in as well, because it controls the southern part of Israel where Gaza is. Gaza used to be part of Egypt. Gaza was part of that whole war between all these Arab states that went to war against the newly formed Israeli state. It's the 67 war. And in that war, Israel took big chunks of territory. They took the West Bank, they took Jerusalem, they took a lot of territory. And they also took Gaza in that war against all these Arab countries. So they occupied Gaza and they had settlers there, but they eventually withdrew from that under Ariel Sharon, the prime minister who briefly interrupted Bibi Netanyahu's almost lifelong reign on power. They took their settlers out of there. It was very violent withdrawal. They didn't want to leave. They took them out of there and they put refugees who had come from the West Bank into Gaza. So most of the people who live in Gaza were refugees who were driven out in the Nakba, which is when something like 750,000 indigenous Palestinians were driven out of their homes in what is now Israel. And they were driven in large part to Gaza, right? That's where they put them, in refugee camps. That's why those people are there, because that used to be part of Egypt. And so that bottom entrance into Gaza, you can get there from Egypt. You want to throw that map back up? I love the map. I'm very map friendly. Let me see what number that is. There it is. So if you just look at where Egypt is, right? You can just, if you squint your eyes, you can kind of see it, and you can see that little strip up there is where Israel is, and Israel empties into Egypt. At the bottom is Gaza. The little Gaza strip goes into Egypt. That's below it. And then you got the big two physically biggest countries in the region are Saudi Arabia and Iran. Like the map is important, right? And so Iran and Saudi Arabia each also compete, as does Egypt, to be the big dogs in the country. Iraq can't be it, it's too poor. And so if they had nukes, imagine an Iran with nukes. This is why the whole West wants them not to have it. But they also said Pakistan and India couldn't have nukes, and they both got them. And they both got them through North Korea, because North Korea used to be eventually the nuclear supermarket. They would help people to get nukes. There was a scientist in North Korea that was, for money, helping countries go nuclear. And there used to be that the West, the hegemonic Europeans who destroyed the whole world with colonialism, also decided that it was up to them who could have nukes. Canada can have them, England can have them, the United States can have them. Israel didn't ask, they just got them. And then North Korea got them. And then North Korea started helping other people get them. Pakistan and India have them. And Pakistan and India have a lifelong sort of, genocidal fight between the two of them, but they have mutually assured destruction. Nuclear weapons, it kind of brings peace in the sense that, if you know somebody can nuke you, you're probably not going to attack them. If, again, we said it earlier in this live, if Ukraine still had nukes, it's highly unlikely Russia would have invaded them because they'd be afraid of being nuked. They still have nuclear reactors, though, including some that aren't super stable and that when you bomb them might leak nuclear stuff. Those are still there. Yes, Israel ain't but a dot on the map. Y'all see how small it is? It's a tiny, tiny, tiny territory that used to be part of the Mandate of Palestine. And the Mandate of Palestine also included, you see the little tan bit next to it, Jordan? That used to be part of the Mandate of Palestine too. The British kind of controlled this area after the Ottoman. It's a long story, but the Ottoman Empire fell after World War I, and the Ottoman Empire had control of a lot of this territory, and they lost their territories to England after World War I. And so World War I, England became the hegemon in the region and controlled much of this area. And they decided who got what. And they said, we'll give half of this, well, like 3/4 of it to this new country we're going to call Israel, and we'll give the other remainder to the Palestinians. But the Palestinians never really got theirs because they're like, hey, then there was a war. Israel won the war and said, y'all ain't getting it. Y'all now are basically occupied. You live under occupation because we're not giving you this other country that England promised. And then there were all these UN resolutions saying, give them the country, give them their land, give them a country. And the Israelis have said no. And when people, I've heard people say, well, it's so small. Why don't the Palestinians just go somewhere else? They're Arabs and all these other people are Arabs, just go there. Here's the problem with that. Would you say that about China and Vietnam? I mean, they're all Asian. Why don't they all just go live there? If you said to somebody who was Chinese and said, you're Asian, Vietnamese people are Asian, why don't you leave and just go live over there? They're not the same people. Just because somebody is of the same general ethnicity doesn't mean they're the same people. people are different ethnicities within one sort of diaspora or when one sort of general agent. And also race is a construct, but you wouldn't tell people from, Cambodia, just go to China. You're not Chinese. Just because Palestinians are Arab doesn't mean they should just go to Saudi Arabia. They're not Saudis. They have a history where they are. They're indigenous to where they are. The Balfour Declaration, correct. Balfour Declaration, and the Balfour Declaration precedes all of World War II. It isn't about the original. It isn't really, just about that. But the Balfour Declaration would precede all that. But the bottom line is, what we have is a region that is very unstable, and that has been very unstable for a very long time. And it's not being made less stable by the United States. It's being made more. It's being made more stable, more unstable by the United States and by Israel. And again, the Balfour Declaration is not even a part of it. The Balfour Declaration far precedes World War II, and even I think World War I. It's like 1917. This is a British lord, the British Foreign Secretary, Arthur Balfour, wrote to Lord Walter Rothschild, pledging British support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The statement aimed to support political Zionism during World War I. While in theory, at least according to the original declaration, they wanted to provide support for emigration from Europe for Jewish people, but supposedly also protect the rights of the indigenous, the people who were there. So this theory that there were no people there isn't true. There were people there, but they said, we're going to allow Jewish people to go to the Mandate of Palestine, but we're going to create a situation where the people there will be protected. That just never happened. As always happens with settler colonialism. I think let's see. Well, let's see. What do you guys want to do? You guys want to keep going, or do you guys want to let it go? Y'all let me know in the chat. You guys have more? Do you have more in you? Because we can keep going. Or we can let you go back to your Saturday. The reality is, it is important, and the reason I go into the whole history, is because it's hard to understand what is happening in the world if you don't get the history. And what I get frustrated about, and what I used to get frustrated about, even as much as I loved my show, I love doing the ReidOut, and I really love doing the ReidOut and AM Joy, is that we only had a limited amount of time. An hour of TV is really 40 minutes.
Is winning.
We're getting keep going winning. Yeah. An hour, of TV time is 40 minutes if you include the commercials. And so you really don't have time to get into an in-depth history of the region, but it's hard to understand it. If you just say we're at war with Iran and your thought is, first of all, people think they must be Arabs, which they're not, or people just assume, well, they're Muslims, that's why they're hostile. That's not true. If you know anything about Islam, it has nothing to do with war or terrorism. Just like, Judaism isn't a naturally expansionist region. Like these religions are being manipulated and layered onto political movements that have political goals. Remember, the original plan for what they were going to do with the Jewish emigres was to put them in Africa. There's a claim that there was a special, draw to this particular land, but that's not true. Initially, they considered putting it in Africa. Because they had colonies in Africa, and they said, well, we own this colonial land, we'll just put them there. And that was very seriously considered. They just didn't do it. They wound up putting it in Palestine, but they could have put it anywhere. It could have gone anywhere. There was colonial interest all over Africa. And the British in particular had colonial interests everywhere, from Ghana to Nigeria, all over the place. And they considered putting those people there. Can you imagine the same thing would be happening there? And when people try to bring it to religion and say, well, this is about the tribes of Israel, yeah, you know what? It doesn't really work, because every single colonial enterprise was about religion. The American Pilgrims were saying that God blessed them with the Americas and that there were no people here. Turns out there were a whole lot of people here, and they didn't want them here. And when they fought back, they said, well, they're terrorists, and they scalped them and then killed them off and killed them with germs and guns. When the Pilgrims arrived in Southern Africa, they said, oh, God has blessed us with this land. Who are those people? Those Kikuyu people. Let's kill them all and enslave them. Right? Yes, I will hydrate. Thank you. And God said we could. Everybody says that. So that it doesn't move me as an argument, right? And also, all people have moved. And so if you want to be technical and literal about Abrahamic faiths, the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims, they all come from Abraham, who originally came, and if you're a church girl, if you're a religious person, you know he came from the land of Ur, the land of Ur. And he was called by God, and God said to him, go on this journey, and I want you to walk with your wives and your oxen and your children, and I want you to go on this journey, and I'm going to take you to the land of Canaan. Ur is not in Palestine. Most scholars believe it's in Iran or Iraq, somewhere between Iran and Iraq. The Tigris and Euphrates, that's Iraq, right? If you want to believe, if you believe in the Bible, the Tigris and Euphrates, that's in Iraq. And so it's either in Iran or Iraq. That's where Abraham comes from. And then he has multiple children. And one of his children is called Ishmael, who I believe is his elder child. And Ishmael is the father of Islam. He has a younger son named Isaac, who becomes the father of Judaism. So each of his children is the father of one of the three. That's why they call them Abrahamic religions. Abram or Abraham is the father of all three of these religions. So if you're technical about it, if you say that people who are the sons of Isaac have a claim to this land of Canaan, so do the Muslims, because they also come from Abraham. I do not have water. Actually, yeah, I took it upstairs. Yeah, I took it. Thank you, Jason. Jason's very kind. He's gonna give me some water. So this is the problem, is that when you're trying to say, well, this is about this one Abrahamic faith, what I say to you is there are three Abrahamic faiths. And one of the groups who descends from what was left of the Canaanites, because God said, and here's the other piece that's going to give you a problem if you're going to try to locate the right of these European Jewish people who are of the Jewish faith, and faithfully so, to say that they have more rights than everyone else. Here's the problem. There are people who live in Palestine, in the Palestinian territories, particularly in the city of Bethlehem, who are Christians and who are of the ethnic group of people who were the followers of Jesus. And they decided to become Christians. And some of those people who are also of that region decided to become Jews. And some of those people, which was Jesus' religion. Jesus was not a Christian, he was a Jew. He was Jewish. He was a Palestinian Jewish man. And some of those people continue to follow his religion, which is Judaism, and they are of the region. And some of those people followed the Christian religion, which is the religion that came from him, that Paul created, which is why you have a Catholic church. And he was in Rome, he's Roman. And some of those people became Muslims. And so all three of these regions have a claim to that region. All three of these religions come from Abraham. And no one who is Abrahamic comes from Palestine, because Abraham was a settler. Abraham didn't come from there. And so the only people who really were there originally are Canaanites. And there are archaeologists looking everywhere for Canaanites. No one who claims to be of the Abrahamic religion can claim to be a Canaanite, because God specifically said, if you really read your Old Testament, not to mix with the Canaanites. He said, you will go to the Canaanites, you will not mix with them. So you actually can't be an original person of that region unless you're a Canaanite. So nobody can make a special claim to having a solo God-claimed indigenous right to that land unless you're a Canaanite, because that was Canaan. It says in the Bible and in the Torah and in the Quran that Abraham came from the land of Ur, thank you very much, Mr. Jason Reid, and went to Canaan, which was thousands of miles away. So people believe it's somewhere between Iraq and Iran. He came to that region, he came to it. He wasn't from it, he came to it, settled there, and was told, don't mix with them Canaanites. He had his wife, he had multiple wives, because back then that's what they did. And one of his wives, who they believe, right now, if you did the map, would be from where the Houthis are. They're like, they think that might be where she was from, because people try to do these modern maps of the past. Yes, we appreciate Jason. Thank you. You need the water. And she is the father. She's the mother of Islam. So people who are Muslim have just as much claim to this land, because Ishmael is also the son of Abraham. So you can't say, well, we only one person. You see what I mean? And yes, Isaac's, He promised you lands. But here's the other problem with doing all of this, is that this whole exercise I just did is irrelevant. Because no claim that starts with God said is legitimate when it comes to actual international law. None. Because we don't make laws based on the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. Countries that do that, we consider to be religious nationalist countries like Iran. And then we say those countries are bad. Or countries like the supposedly secular nation of Israel that now is effectively run by religious nationalists, Jewish nationalists. We think that's bad if you're making laws based on religious nationalism, whether you're in Israel or Iran, or whether you're in the United States and you're trying to do that here. We don't want to live in a country that has religion as the basis of its formation or of its laws. We are very specifically not that. And so we shouldn't be run that way. And we shouldn't be saying we're going to recognize claims to land ownership based on a religious book, because everyone interprets that religious book differently. I have people in the chat saying, Ur is Iraq. I have people saying, Ur is Iran. I have this like interesting biblical map upstairs that kind of makes it a little more vague. You want to leave it to me and my interpretation of the Bible to decide who gets what land? That's crazy. That's not how it works. God can't tell you get somebody's land. When people live there, that's their land. And I don't care how you feel about your religion, and your religion says, but God said. I don't care what God said. There are people living there. You need to negotiate with those people. If they'll sell you the land, that's one thing. But you just go and take it, put a gun to their head and say, that's mine because God said. I flew all the way from the United States or Russia or Poland, and now this is mine because God. That's not how that works, Papi Chulo. That's not how it should work. But that's how it worked. And why did it work that way? Europe.
Well, God was also a real estate agent. Did you know that?
Yeah. God
He's a real estate agent. Yeah, he told everybody, he told y'all back then, I'm a real estate agent, so y'all can have this.
You guys have got to read Robbie Jones's book. I think it was White Too Long. It's the one where he talked about, he said that he loved the 1619 Project, but he would love to see the 1619 Project be the 1492 Project, because it was in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, when the Catholic Church in Europe decreed that the age of exploration should begin, and that men of great valor should get on ships and sail out of Europe, go throughout the world, and bring back gold. Bring back gold to the church. This is the gilding of the church, which is supposedly anti-biblical and anti-Jesus. Remember, he turned over the tables. They were like, no, turn the tables back over and bring us some gold. And anywhere you find humans, anywhere you find people, you should try to convert them to Christianity. If they refuse, you have the right to kill them or enslave them. And when that decree went out from the Catholic Church, and I believe the Presbyterian Church did a similar one, that decree launches the age of exploration. These Columbus, the Christopher Columbuses, all these people, they go out into the world to try to find gold for the church because they believe that's going to get them to heaven. So they go out looking for gold and they find people everywhere, people. And they decide to listen to the church and either try to enslave those people or kill them. And this is where you start this idea of race, of racial exploitation, and it modernizes slavery, which has existed, even in the Bible, but not as existed after that. And when these Europeans started to get good in this industry and really started to make a lot of money, because again, the love of money is the root of all evil, they created something called capitalism. I did say Papi Chulo. It's one of my favorite sayings. I grew up in Denver. So Mexican, you throw like Mexican lingo in everywhere because I grew up in Denver. They sort of systematized it, like the way that Ford systematized car production. They systematized slavery, and it was so profitable that they decided to turn it into a system. In order to do that, they had to find a way to ensure that these slaves would be constantly perpetuating themselves and wouldn't run away or, pair up with the indentured servants who knew that they were on a time limit. Indentured servitude, they knew it was on a time limit. They said I should be. They said we're being selfish. Go in and teach more tomorrow. We'll come back. I have a little longer in me. I think I got it. I got some more time in me. Thank you very much for thinking of me. I appreciate it. We'll go till the top of the next hour and then we'll go home. And then everybody will take their Friday.
How about we go to the bottom of this half?
Bottom of this half hour. Okay, we can do that. We'll go to 9:30. That sounds good.
All right.
And so they decided to systematize it, right, and create this this systematized slavery. So they invented race, and they said, you now who are the permanently enslaved are Black, and we who are the permanent enslavers are white. It's all construct. But unfortunately, these constructs have created something called capitalism. That is the original perfect capitalism, right? And this system of exploitation, theft, theft of land, theft of freedom, theft of bodies, theft of this is a European sort of, it's a specialty. I mean, other people have done it, right? The Mongols, all these other empires have done it. I'm sure the Persians weren't nice when they grabbed people, they enslaved people. Like, it's not like it's specifically only Europe has ever done it, but they did it on a scale that was so industrial that no one's ever done that, right? But the problem with this system, the Romans did it. This is what Jesus was fighting. He was fighting an empire that was enslaving and harming people based on them being of the religion that was not worshiping the king of Rome. The emperor of Rome was a god. And you're supposed to worship the emperor of Rome. This is why Jesus was considered to be committing apostasy. And that's why they were like, we have to kill him, because he is saying that there is another God that's not the Roman emperor. And we can't have that, because he's going to have people dissing and dismissing their obligations to the Roman Empire. And so that empire was very similar: cruel, brutal, slavery, everything, right? But the thing that's different—
You may mess with his tax money. Messing with his coin.
Messing with the coins. And the Romans wanted that tax money. They wanted the coin. And everybody, it's greed, it's the root of all evil, is the coin. People love you, Jason. They said we gonna put a bow on this. But the reality is, right, it's the coin of the realm. It's greed. But the thing that makes the reason, and the right gets mad when we play up U.S. slavery as different from all these others: Roman slavery, Persians, the Arabs that did slavery on the continent, all the other people who've done it. The only people who ever did this version is the United States, because what they said is, we're going to take settler colonialism and we're going to add to it a racial imperative that makes every child and grandchild of a slave forever. And we're going to say that that's based on your race. That's never been done before. You could get out of slavery. You weren't your child wasn't a slave because you were a slave. There were slaves that you could could rise to try to become king. Like all of the, and also they switched Pax Americana, which is paterfamilias. Sorry, not Pax Americana. Paterfamilias. Paterfamilias is the way Europe always operated, right? It's why you have the thing called the bastard. I think I've said this before. You had a thing called a bastard. If you are a nobleman and you had a child with a non-noble woman, that child is your bastard. It inherits the condition of you. And so it could make a claim on you. That child can make a claim on you as your bastard. You could be the bastard of a king. But in America, they were so thirsty and greedy for the money they were making off of slavery that they said, we're going to now switch it and say the children of enslaved take the condition of their mother. So as long as the mother was a slave, they're a slave, and their children are a slave, and their child is a slave, and they're a slave forever based on being Black and being the child of a slave. And you're never going to be able to get out of it. And then we're going to take you and we're going to treat you like a cow, and we're going to sell you like a cow. If you give birth to a foal, that is a foal, not a human. We can sell it, even if we are the father of that foal, because we raped you. And they did a lot. They raped a lot of people. And so this idea of chattel slavery, this is unique to the United States of America. Not even England, and not even in the Caribbean did they do this. This was very, very specific to us, to this country. It was this idea of inheritable, racially inheritable, perpetual slavery in which you are not human, you are chattel, which is why you're 3/5 of a person. You're counted for the purposes of the census to give the enslavers more power in Congress, but you yourself aren't human. To the point where Black enslaved people weren't even citizens until the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. We were not considered people, which is why they were like, you can put your breast in my infant's mouth and feed my baby, but you can't eat from my plate or drink from my water fountain, but you can literally breastfeed my child. And so it is a very different thing. And the reduction, and so that is why we separate chattel slavery from all the past history, where people try to say, but everybody had slavery. Well, not this. And then and this settler colonialism that we produce, I have to correct what I said when Peter Beinart was on. I talked about the Israelization of America. It's actually the Americanization of Israel, because all these other countries have taken this very sadistic version of what we did in this country that was unique to all the world. No one's ever done this before. created this chattel system where it was based on your race, to the point where if you had one drop of black blood, which isn't even a thing because race is a construct, if you had one drop, if you had 1/100th of your ancestry was black, you were black, so that they could sell you. And they did that very specifically because they were having relations with their own relatives. You know, Sally Hemings was related to Thomas Jefferson's wife. So he was raping this child at 14. He was a Jeffrey Epstein that was selling and sexually abusing children, his own children, and his wife's cousin, which is who Sally Hemings was. This was very different. It was very unique, but it created a system of wealth that was so extravagant and so extraordinary. These men who would have never, maybe in some cases wouldn't have even been noblemen in Europe, were suddenly like little kings. They had little kingdoms in which they were the king. They owned their wife. They owned their daughters. They owned all these black people, and they could sell them, buy them at will. They could, make more stock by simply forcing themselves on their female enslaved people and make more and then sell that child, which they did. They sell their own kids. This is sick. It's very different. This is not Roman slavery. This is not Arab slavery. This is not the same thing. It's very, very different. And so that system that produced racism and hatred and really a sense among a lot of white people that black people weren't even people. The idea that Trump could release a video that says that likens black people to apes, and the Obamas at that, like the pristine, brilliant black people. But that is a mentality that came from this system that said that black people weren't even humans. So you could do what you want with them, beat them, do whatever you want. You could do anything you want with them. It's the same mentality that Epstein had toward girls and kids. If you don't quite think a person is a person, you can do anything to them. And I'm telling you that this Irgun Stern gang system, if you read the tract, if you can find any of them, it's very hard to find them. The things they wrote about Arabs are the equivalent of what American whites would say about black people. It was an equivalent racism to what Germans said about them. The only reason the Germans were so hateful toward Jewish Germans that they said they weren't white. They stripped them of whiteness, even though they looked white. They looked just the same. But they said, well, you're not white. You're of that religion, therefore you're not even white. And then you had these Europeans go to the Middle East and look at those indigenous people, those Arab people, and say, you're just a slave race. We can do whatever we want to you. We can take your land. We can take your house. We can take your farm. We can take your olive trees. You can do nothing about it. We rock with God and you are nothing. That mentality is what Bibi Netanyahu is selling in order to keep power forever. He's selling the same kind of Jim Crow mentality that people here sold about us. And people ask, well, why do black people care so much about Palestinians? Because we see ourselves in them. We see ourselves in them. We see ourselves in the dispossession, in the dismissal of their humanity, in the dismissal of their religion, in the dismissal of their lives, in saying that their color, a lot of them are actually black, but even if they're brown, we see ourselves in their disposition. We see themselves in the way they are dehumanized. We see ourselves in them. And by the way, they also rock with us during Black Lives Matter. Remember, Black Lives Matter began with the Dream Defenders, and the Dream Defenders were two men who were best friends and roommates, one black, one Palestinian. And when Black Lives Matter happened, Palestinians stood in Gaza and the West Bank and held up signs that said Black Lives Matter. We rock with people who rock with us. There's a reason for that. And even during the 1960s, if you go back and you look at SNCC, they were rocking with Palestinian rights. Dr. King, who initially was very pro-Israel, in the late 60s, not long before he died, he said, you know what? They need to give those Arabs some rights. He kind of went, I don't know about that. He canceled a trip. He was supposed to go to Israel and didn't go because he felt, after the 1967 war, it wouldn't be appropriate because the Arabs shouldn't be dispossessed of their land. So people try to get history real simple. I like the complicated, really nuanced history because there's more to it than you sometimes get on the news. There's just more to it. And so I wanted to know as a sixth grader why those Iranians took our hostages. It wasn't enough for you to say they're Muslims, they're brown, they're mean.
Or they hate our freedoms
right.
and all that bullshit that they talk about. They hate our freedoms and crap like that.
They don't hate our freedoms. We took their freedom. Sit with that for a minute. They hate our freedoms. They had our freedoms. We took it. We took away their country in the 1950s when we were sock hopping and white folks were stealing rock and roll from black people, dancing in hoop skirts to Elvis. We were stealing their freedom. We took their freedom, y'all. We took their country from them. They did the same. I mean, right now, like I said, my father's country, Congo, should be Wakanda. They should be the richest country on earth based on the minerals. But we took their freedom. We took Patrice Lumumba. We took him away. We said, you can't have it. We did the same thing in Ghana. And Nkrumah said, I'm going to make my country great. I'm going to build canals. I'm going to build. And the U.S. deposed him. They got him deposed. The CIA went in there and messed him up because he was saying, unite Africa. Why not? Africa says, we want a currency. Libya, not a good guy, Gaddafi, not a good guy. But he said, let's have a gold currency that's across Africa. They were like, you got to die. Got to kill you. And we should ask ourselves why. Never let your government tell you it's doing things just because they are looking out for your freedom. Your government is almost never looking out for your freedom unless they are completely watched by you and surveilled by you. We should be surveilling the government, not the other way around. Don't just believe it when people say they're doing things for your freedom. Bibi tells his people, the Israeli people, that he's doing this for them. He's not doing this for them. He's doing this for himself. Bibi Netanyahu doesn't care about his people. If he cared about his people a year back when they got the information they were going to do October 7th, he wouldn't have let them kids go to that concert. He would have protected those kids. Those dead kids are on him because they knew that attack was coming and they let it happen. The Hamas people were shocked that they got over the wall. Nobody did anything. They didn't deploy the military for 9 hours to go get those kids. And they lied to us and told us 1,200 civilians died and they were all concert kids. 300 of them were military because they hit a military base. A bunch of them were police. They didn't tell us that. They didn't give us that information. I got it from Haaretz because I read Haaretz because they actually tell the truth. So I'm like, So all the things we were told about that attack, it wasn't quite what it was. And them little dead kids, and then we find out that some of the people who died on that day were killed by their own military because they just started, they finally scrambled to it, started dropping bombs. Some of those people were incinerated by their own military. We weren't told that. We were just told we had to have this unrequited rage at Hamas and that Hamas did it for no reason. We didn't know allowed to do context. We couldn't say who Hamas was.
Babies getting their heads decapitated, told the president of the United States that, and he repeated it.
And he repeated it twice. We were told these are headshots, but we were also told that the Kuwaitis were throwing people in oil, in hot boiling oil, and that's why we need to go to a war in Kuwait. First of all, where's the evidence they were throwing people in hot boiling oil? Turned out that was a lie. And it didn't happen. We were told that Saddam Hussein was killing children in incubators. That's why we need to go to war in Iraq. First of all, where's the evidence of that? We weren't even allowed to ask. Y'all don't know what it was like being in the media during the Iraq war. You couldn't even ask for context. Why are we going to war with Iraq? And I remember writing a piece for which I almost got fired, in which I said, I don't see the connection between Iraq and 9/11. It doesn't make sense to me why you are using and manipulating our anger and rage and horror over 9/11 to go to Iraq. It didn't make sense. I almost got fired for that op-ed. And then I had to leave the media because I was so disgusted by the cheering for the Moabs that we dropped on Baghdad. You saw those images we showed earlier of what it looked like when we dropped bombs on a girls' school. We did that to a whole city, Baghdad. They did nothing to us. Saddam Hussein was a terrible person. Let's say he was throwing people out of incubators. The Iraqi people should deal with him. Let's say the Kuwaitis were throwing people in boiling oil. Ooh, don't let the Kuwaiti people get to you. If that's what you're doing, that doesn't mean that we should go to war there. Since when are we the police of the whole world? They're now claiming we gotta bomb Nigeria because of Christians. Since when do we care about Black Christians in Africa? When did we start caring? Because there's Black Christians all over Africa that are getting slaughtered and we're not doing anything about it. But now we suddenly claim to, do we though? Because Black people, the MAGA people here don't even care about Black Christians here. Because Black Christians who went into a Minneapolis church to say that you can't be a Christian and be for ICE because God loved the immigrant and said you have to care for the stranger and you're not caring for the stranger if you're part of ICE, then 39 of them are now going to be indicted. They are now indicted. Those Black Christians who tried to say that Christianity means loving the immigrant, they are being indicted, including Don Lemon, who said to the pastor, I'm a Christian and I'm a journalist. They don't care about Black Christians. So now you care about not Black Christians here. You fire in Black Christians here because of DEI, But you can go all the way to Nigeria and save Black Christians? Are you now? Because if those Nigerian Black Christians tried to immigrate here, you deport them immediately. You don't want them here. You don't care about Black Christians. That's a lie. So always question your government, because your government will always tell you it's doing things for your benefit. Thank you, Butterfly, for the $20. Appreciate it. They will always say they're doing it for your benefit. They said we were going into the Iraq war for our benefit. What was the benefit? Did you remember getting a benefit out of our war in Iraq? What did you get out of the war in Afghanistan? We gave these girls 20 years of hope to go to school. Then we bounced, which we should have because we were there for 20 years. And those girls are right back under the veil and can't go to school. What was the benefit to them or to us of 20 years of lies? We did nothing. What did we do for Central and South America? Is any country there better for our CIA having overthrown their governments? No. We got a drug war in which the only thing that they can sell is cocaine. And then we're mad because our people want cocaine. The drug wars and the war on drugs is a product of the United States creating so much despair and lack of hope among our own people that we become the biggest customers for the drugs that are the only thing left for the people in Central and South America to sell after we wreck their economy and overthrow their governments. But we're supposed to believe that these people are implacably evil and that when we bomb them, we're the good guy. We're always the good guy. The United States is where they invented the idea of the superhero. And so we're always the superhero, but sometimes we're Bane. Sometimes we're the Joker. And right now, we're the Joker. But not even as entertainment, as a Joker. Because Donald Trump, I like to say to people that say that he's the devil, he's not the devil. The devil can quote scripture. The devil knows scripture as well as God. The devil is dangerous because the devil is genius. The devil is clever. Trump is not the devil. Now, I'm not saying Trump sold his soul to the devil, but I'm also saying that he didn't sell his soul to the devil. He's not the devil. But when we get to have a chance to remove this regime, the pure evil that it represents, yes, to the person in the chat that said it is evil. This regime, what they are doing is evil. What they've done to Iran is evil. I don't care how bad that government is. It's not on us to overthrow their government. If people get good and mad, they will Haiti it out and they will overthrow that government. And if they want our support, they want us to cheer for them and they want us to support them, they will ask for it. Give people agency. Brown people are adults. And if they want our help, they will ask. They didn't ask. And what are you taking and stealing from them? What are you colonizing while you're over there? That's what I want to know. I have questions and I will keep asking questions on behalf of you guys. I appreciate each and every one of you who's taken the time. We had so many people in this live and it was lovely to have you here. I promise you I will continue to ask questions because I'm curious about stuff and I don't like our government doing things over the heads of our elected officials who we asked to represent us in Congress. I don't like the idea that a president of the United States is going around acting like he's the Shah of Iran.
He is right now, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Claw back your power, Congress.
And last thing I will say is when we look at these midterm elections, because it might be our last chance to save ourselves from this nightmare, I want you all to be discerning and be discerning in the primary, because we need to take an army into Gilead, because we need less an election than an exorcism in November. We need an exorcism. Latoya, thank you. We need an exorcism, not an election.
Get rid of every single last one of them.
The power of Christ compels you. And we don't want a theocracy, so I'm not going to try to use theocratic terms, but we need an exorcism. And the only way that we can exorcise these demons that have tried to turn our country into the equivalent, the Christian equivalent of Iran, is we have to have an army that has a faith in the people, not a faith in Palantir or ICE or the Department of Homeland Security or AIPAC or anybody but us. We need people who will fight not for these insane corporations, oligarchs left or right, surveillance companies, tech bros, or people who are lobbying for a foreign government's interests, not our own. Send an army into November that will fight and do unthinkable things to fight for us. That's what Mamdani does. He says, I will do the unthinkable. I will make preschool free, make rent cheaper. I will do the unthinkable for you. Trump says, I'll do the unthinkable for you, MAGA. But then he only does the unthinkable for himself. Send an army in there that can fight. Look at those primary candidates and ask yourself, of everyone on that ballot, who is going to fight like they are exercising the devil? That's who I'm sending into November. That's the only people I'm voting for. If you're not willing to, the power of Christ compels you, the devil and the demons, I'm voting for you. I don't care if you got a D after your name. That's what I'm saying. Jason, are you with me?
You know where I'm at. You know where I'm at.
And if they ain't a Democrat, it's just, it is what it is. Sorry, Democrats. If a working families person is on that ballot and they say they're the one that's going to power of Christ compels you, these demons, I'm rolling with them. I'm not necessarily rolling with you, Democrats. You better come in here and fight like hell, like you on the playground, and you better windmill the shit out of the other side. I want windmill swinging. I want you scratching. I want y'all to be like Miss Maddie J. Like somebody came for Herman for us. Love you guys. Have a fabulous rest of your weekend. Stay safe, stay sane, and we will see you Monday night. Thank you very much for all the little tips, Star Child. We appreciate you. See you Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, The Joy Reid Show. Peace and love.
Getting back to the basics, grassroots level. Let me dig a little deeper with the shovel. Plenty can't tell the forest from the trees, and I'm hard to detect, like a black hole in the dark. Injustice anywhere, it's a threat to justice everywhere. Let me make this clear, I got a bone to pick, and I'll never fear the threat of poverty. They don't want to talk about it, they rather party, so I'm a real talk about it, for sure.